Chapter 600. The obelisk must be handed over, Small Saber King said coldly. This mystical power was the most valuable item in that treasure trove. He'd obtained other treasures and clearly knew how astonishing those treasures' effects were, so he obviously coveted the thunderclap ninth heaven even more. But I don't want to hand it over, what to do? Ling Han said with a smile. Small Saber King revealed a dense killing intent, and raised his palm again, killing intent boiling. Small Saber King, you really want to be an unfilial son? Ling Han said with a frown. Shua, Small Saber King waved his hand, and a saber light slashed out, turning into a shocking heavenly saber that slashed towards the golden ship. This definitely surpassed the level of saber chi, rising to the height of ray, its destructive power extremely terrifying. From the power of that slash earlier, it could be inferred that the opponent's saber ray condensed at least 20 flashes of chi. This was only a rough estimate. Small Saber King might not have gone all out, so the power of his saber ray might be even stronger, perhaps reaching the height of 29 flashes, or even 30 flashes of chi. Ling Han couldn't match, and with a slash of saber light, the mountains and rivers below suffered a calamity again. Another human village was affected, and the entire stronghold turned into flying ash. Small Saber King, Ling Han said word by word. He had seen quite a number of ruthless people, but this was the first time he had seen someone who did not care about human life at all, and who killed so casually as if it was a speck of dust. This was the absolute saber sect's disciple. Although the setting sun saber emperor of the past was also cold and emotionless, his saber only beheaded the strong, never attacking the weak, and even more disdainfully attacking mortals. 2 generations of geniuses were obviously so outstanding, but their temperaments were so different. Ling Han was furious, and said, Xian Heir, you control the ship to attack that bastard, I'll restrain him. Big brother Han, be careful. Zhu Xian Heir warned, worry on her pretty face. She obviously didn't doubt Ling Han's strength and talent, but Small Saber King cultivated quite a few more years than Ling Han, after all, which was a sore point. Ling Han left the cabin and faced Small Saber King coldly. Hunyo also appeared, putting her little hands on her waist, also very angry. This bastard actually dared to attack the cute Lord Nyo Nyo, he was really tired of living. Huh, you're Ling Han. Small Saber King stared at Ling Han for a while, and suddenly called out. Didn't think I'm quite famous. Ling Han said indifferently. A heaven-grade alchemist is quite rare. Small Saber King said indifferently. However, in my eyes, so what if you're a heaven-grade alchemist? I heard that you obtained the inheritance of the 12 palaces and the whereabouts of a divine treasure trove. I'm not interested in the inheritance of the 12 palaces, but I do have some interest in the divine treasures. How about this, if you tell me the whereabouts of the steel and the divine treasure, not only will I spare your life, I will also give you a treasure. How about it? Ling Han smirked coldly, and said, nothing, I don't deal with beasts. Saber saber saber. Saber saber. Saber. Ling saber saber ling, saber light flashed, and everything was resplendent. Small Saber King had unsheathed an azure-long saber at an unknown time, and forcefully split apart that origin crystal cannon, slicing past him on both sides. Saber chi wrapped around his entire body like a god, his aura terrifying. You want to hurt me with just this golden dragon ship? Small Saber King's expression was cold, and his gaze was sharp like a heavenly saber. Die, Nyo's lightning thunderbolt bomb. Nyo flicked her hand, and 2 bolts of lightning immediately shot out, shooting towards Small Saber King. These 2 bolts of lightning were actually faster than the origin crystal cannon from before. Lightning was the fastest thing in the world. Small Saber King slashed horizontally. Piu, saber ray slashed out, but both annihilated the 2 bolts of lightning. This couldn't help but give Ling Han and Small Saber King a huge shock. Small Saber King was at the peak of the spiritual infant tier, and even formed Saber Ray, while Hunyo was only at the flower blossom tier, not even having chi. However, both of their attacks were annihilated, which meant that the difference in power between their attacks wasn't big. This completely subverted the common sense of martial art. Small Saber King was both furious and shocked. That attack obviously wasn't done with his full strength, but it definitely shouldn't have been such a result. However, this only made him shocked for a moment, but after seeing these two bolts of lightning, he was even more furious. My inheritance was actually stolen by this little girl. He was practically going mad. In that ancient dynasty's treasure trove, the most precious thing was obviously the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven's inheritance, and according to the information he obtained, there was only one chance to inherit. Once the mystical power was inherited, the obelisk would self-destruct, and definitely wouldn't let a second person obtain it. After plotting for 3 years, he was about to succeed, but was suddenly hit in the head. How could he not be furious? I'll kill you all and directly search your souls. Small Saber King said menacingly. The inheritance couldn't be expressed with words, so if he wanted to obtain the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, then he could only search souls. Bitch, you won't have the chance. Ling Han said coldly. Nyo's awesome. Hu Nyo shouted loudly. Her hands moved in succession, and one lightning after another shot out like raindrops, blasting towards Small Saber King. She really was a freak. Ling Han just comprehended a bit of the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, and was still far from actually using it to injure the enemy, but this little girl could already use it freely. It was practically inconceivable. Perhaps this was also related to her interweaving with lightning. At that time, she practically absorbed the power of lightning from the thunder battle armor and the obelisk cleanly, thus allowing her to skip the step of being struck by lightning, and directly be able to use the mystical power freely. Small Saber King snorted coldly and brandished his long saber, firing one saber ray after another, sweeping towards the golden ship. Although Zhu Xian dodged in every possible way, these saber rays were really too dense. Peng, 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 she couldn't avoid being hit a few times. Fortunately, the golden ship still had a layer of shield, and after being fully activated, it could block spiritual infant-tier attacks. However, after a few hits, the shield trembled and was on the verge of breaking. Hu Nyo shouted loudly, and took the initiative to attack. Her figure flashed, and she actually turned into a bolt of lightning, charging towards Small Saber King, instantly appearing in front of him. Her small fist shot out, wrapped in lightning. How dare you! Small Saber King snorted coldly and brandished his saber, about to cut Hu Nyo in half at the waist. Small Saber King, Ling Han roared loudly, already unleashing the sunset bow. Drawing the bow and knocking an arrow, endless origin power condensed, and the entire arrow turned into white light. He already activated the Eye of Truth and found the weakest area of Small Saber King's defense. Small Saber King originally wanted to cut Hu Nyo in half, but after discovering Ling Han's accumulated power, his expression couldn't help but change. This arrow made him not dare to be careless, and his saber slightly slowed down. Xiao, Ling Han shot out an arrow. The furious arrow tore through the air, almost disregarding the distance, and already shot in front of Small Saber King. However, Small Saber King was truly powerful. Even under such circumstances, he still swung his saber, slashing out a world-shocking saber ray. Peng, the arrow was instantly sent flying, and a bend actually appeared on the perfectly straight arrow. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 601. Peng, peng. However, although Small Saber King deflected the arrow, he was struck by Hu Nyo's small fist. Even with his awe-inspiring might, he still staggered and spat out a mouthful of blood, his entire body trembling. How could the might of lightning be underestimated? Damn it! His eyes were murderous. This mystical power should have been his, and the stronger Hu Nyo's current battle prowess was, the more jealous he was, wishing he could immediately split open Hu Nyo's head and extract the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven mystical power. Very good, you guys have successfully enraged me. Small Saber King gripped his saber. Wang, saber chi overflowed all over his body. Black light interweaved, and the air of despair interweaved between heaven and earth, making one have the urge to commit suicide. Ling Han's heart trembled. The path small saber king walked was the saber of despair. When the saber slashed out, it would steal one's mind and make one feel despair, even forgetting to parry. Under the influence of this saber intent, Zhu Xian'er had difficulty controlling the boat, and the golden boat kept swaying left and right as if about to fall. Xian'er! Ling Han shouted loudly, like the evening drum and morning bell, thought-provoking. Zhu Xian'er immediately came back to her senses. She also had the aptitude of a king among martial artists, starting to walk her own path. Even if she wasn't as freakish as Ling Han, she wouldn't be completely controlled by someone else's saber intent. At first, she just wasn't on guard, but now, with Ling Han's shout, she immediately recovered herself. All of you, die! Small Saber King waved his saber and slashed. Saber ray rolled, reaching a length of 300 meters with astonishing might. Hunyo was agile, and as her small body swayed, she attacked Small Saber King again. Meanwhile, Ling Han took out another arrow and knocked it on the bow, but didn't release it. The attack that was about to be released was the greatest threat. Small Saber King had to keep most of his attention on Ling Han, because the latter's arrow was indeed enough to threaten him, and he had to guard against it. However, if Ling Han shot this arrow, then he'd be fearless with a slash, yet Ling Han didn't shoot, leaving him on tenterhooks and distracted. Hunyo took the opportunity to attack. As she brandished her small fists, lightning intertwined. Small Saber King snorted, shook off Hunyo, and charged towards Ling Han. This disaster had to be eliminated first, or else he wouldn't be able to unleash 100% of his battle prowess. Peng, peng, Hunyo's fists landed on Small Saber King's back, but only set off a series of lightning. His defense was already completely activated, and he could actually take Hunyo's attacks head-on without being injured. Small Saber King brandished his saber, and charged towards Ling Han. Damn it, you actually dare ignore Nyo. Hunyo was furious. Her small body once again turned into lightning, and with another flash, she already appeared behind Small Saber King. She directly rode on his neck, opened her small mouth, and bit at him. Ah! Small Saber King screamed. He'd clearly opened up his defense completely, and even a high-level spiritual infant tier elite couldn't possibly break through such a defense, but when encountering Hunyo's sharp teeth, it became a mere decoration. A streak of blood flew out. It was bright silver in color, displaying this person's uniqueness. Damn it! Small Saber King brandished his saber and slashed behind him. Hunyo flashed again, turning into lightning to escape. Her battle instincts were too shocking. Small Saber King, Ling Han shouted sharply, and shot out another arrow. You really think I can't do anything to you guys? Small Saber King gave a long howl, and his whole body stimulated with a silver light. His whole person also turned silver, as if he'd become a statue, and his battle prowess rose sharply. Peng, his saber slashed past, directly shattering the arrow into pieces. Not good. Ling Han's expression changed in shock, and he shouted loudly, Hunyo, quickly come back. Small Saber King was originally at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and even had one foot in the deity transformation tier. Now, perhaps using some kind of secret technique or activating his bloodline, he actually directly crossed into the deity transformation tier. This made him completely unrivaled. Hunyo was quick-witted, and with a flash of lightning, she already appeared on the golden ship. Go! Ling Han shouted loudly, and continued to knock his bow, shooting at Small Saber King. However, after shooting 3 arrows consecutively, he also felt like collapsing, and couldn't even stand steadily, his figure swaying. This arrow slightly stopped Small Saber King. After all, it was a combination of annihilating dragon star arrow and eye of truth, and even used 7th tier rare metal, so it couldn't be taken lightly no matter what. However, For Small Saber King, who'd already crossed into the deity transformation tier, this was only a matter of swinging his saber once more. Zhu Xian hurriedly controlled the ship and swiftly shot away. "Can you escape?" Small Saber King sneered. Pang! A fist suddenly smashed down from the air, just happening to block the golden ship's flight path. Pang! A terrifying power surged, and the spiritual infant tier level shield instantly shattered, and the entire ship directly exploded. At this time, a peculiar human figure appeared in the sky, as if made of transparent crystal. Light refracted irregularly on his body, and one had to look carefully to discover the existence of such a person. Previously, he'd been hiding in the air as if he didn't exist at all, but now, he suddenly launched an attack, smashing the golden ship with a single punch. Small Saber King chased over, but he was immediately surprised, because although the fragments danced, he didn't find the remains of Ling Han and the others. "Teleported away," he murmured. That peculiar person stood behind him, about the same height as him, yet as if he didn't exist. If it weren't for the refraction of light, he truly could completely disappear from sight. Diamond Puppet. This was the highest level puppet in the ancient dynasty's treasury, possessing deity transformation tier battle prowess. The special nature of the material made it seem like it could turn invisible, and it possessed considerable intelligence, practically a natural killer. Even if he teleported, he wouldn't have escaped too far. Small Saber King murmured. "With my art of remote sensing heaven and earth, I'll be able to find him very quickly. After obtaining my mystical power, he still wants to run." He stepped into the air, and the diamond puppet quietly disappeared in the air. No one knew where it went. Ling Han obviously didn't use the instant teleportation talisman. He indeed had such a treasure, but didn't plan on using it here. The instant the golden ship was destroyed, he stored Hunyou and Zhu Xian into the Black Tower. The Black Tower was like a grain of mustard seed as it floated down from the sky, falling into the forest river below, flowing along with the water. Ling Han soon exited the Black Tower, turned around, and returned, searching the previous battle area. Found it. Not long after, he found a drop of silver liquid on the ground. This was Small Saber King's blood. He probably had a special bloodline, or cultivated some kind of cultivation technique, actually turning his blood silver. This drop of blood was bitten out by Hunyou. A few drops spilled out, but some splashed into the water, already diluted, and couldn't be found again. Only this drop fell on a leaf. The spiritual infant tier's blood was very domineering, emitting a terrifying aura. The plant's vitality was already extinguished, and when Ling Han approached, he felt a huge pressure. "It's just a drop of blood, and it still wants to overturn the heavens." Ling Han spread out his origin power to protect himself. Body of iron sheet gave him enough qualification to resist such pressure. He collected this drop of blood into the vial of curses. "I won't curse you to death." Chapter 602. With Sunset Bow, Ling Han wanted to injure Small Saber King and take his blood to curse. However, Small Saber King was indeed strong, slashing away all his attacks, and it was Hunyou who made the contribution. He stretched out his finger and pressed on a pattern on the vial of curses. It was a death curse. However, to Ling Han's surprise, that pattern didn't light up. What's going on?" Ling Han was startled, but soon realized that some people were tough and hard to be cursed to death. For example, he was fine even after entering the ancient mine, needing at least 10 days to half a month to be affected by the curse chi. To curse Small Saber King to death, one drop of blood wasn't enough. Ling Han settled for the next best thing, and said to himself, "I can't curse you to death, so I'll curse you to get sick. I can't let you off so easily." He pressed on another pattern, and this time, the pattern lit up. This meant that the curse took effect, and the effect was to get sick. As for what kind of sickness, Ling Han didn't know. Ling Han started to advance, feeling that he really suffered a great loss this time. The golden ship was destroyed, and he even lost 3 arrows. In the future, he definitely had to take down Small Saber King. Small Saber King obtained almost all the ancient dynasty's treasures, which was enough to make up for his losses. But now, Ling Han decided to break through to the spiritual infant tier as soon as possible. Otherwise, he could only flee if he encountered Small Saber King, and if he didn't still have the Black Tower, he wouldn't even be able to flee for his life. Under the powerful pressure, his fighting spirit also became high. However, after walking for a while, he suddenly felt a sense of danger, and raised his voice, "Since you're here, why hide?" Small Saber King's figure appeared, and he said coldly, "You think you can escape from my palm, truly too naive. Whether I'm naive or not is another matter, but I think you're going to be out of luck." Ling Han said with a smile. "Oh, how unlucky," Small Saber King said casually as he pressed towards Ling Han. He didn't dare to be careless, as he hadn't sensed Hunyou's presence all this while. That little girl could turn into lightning, and her speed was extremely fast. Moreover, her teeth were extremely sharp, and could even bite through his defenses. Ling Han thought about it and said, "Just wait and see." "Ha!" Small Saber King sneered. He naturally thought that Ling Han was only making empty threats. He continued to close in on Ling Han. His blade will spread out and locked onto Ling Han. As long as Ling Han made the slightest movement, he would slash out his heaven blade and kill him on the spot. The reason why he hadn't drawn his saber yet was that he still wanted to know Hunyou's whereabouts. She had grasped the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven secret technique, and this was something he was determined to obtain. But at this moment, his stomach suddenly growled. Small Saber King's expression instantly became strange. He actually had a stomachache. How is that possible? After advancing into the flower blossom tier, martial artists would have broken away from the mortal world, and it was impossible for them to fall sick, what more a stomachache. But now, he really felt that his stomach was in extreme pain, and there was something that was about to rush out. There's no justice in this. Starting from the flower blossom tier, even if a martial artist ate, the beneficial things would be absorbed by the body, while the impurities would be expelled through the skin. Their entire body would be free of impurities, and there would definitely be no need for the cycle of 5 grains. Now, he just wanted to relieve himself and release to his heart's content. "Yes, you're out of luck as expected," Ling Han said with a smile. Small Saber King wanted to draw his saber, but with a pu, he let out a loud fart. His face turned green, and that urge became stronger and stronger, making him clamp his legs tightly together to no avail. He couldn't hold it back no matter what. You just wait." Small Saber King was someone, after all, so how could he possibly spew shit and fight at the same time? He hurriedly twisted his butt and left, scuttling into a clump of grass. Instantly, the sounds of his stomach moving were like thunder, crackling and unstoppable. "Admirable, admirable," Ling Han said from afar. Small Saber King is indeed powerful, a move of suffocating the enemy is practically unprecedented. "I really can't learn it even if I wanted to," Small Saber King wanted to retort, but his stomach was surging, and instantly turned into a muffled groan as he held back his strength and sucked to his heart's content. "Eat my arrow." Ling Han drew the sunset bow, and the arrow was already on the bowstring. "Ling Han, you're despicable and shameless." Small Saber King roared angrily. Without Hunyou's restraint, he actually wasn't afraid of Ling Han's archery, but with his current situation, did he have to brandish his saber while erupting behind his buttocks? Against a deranged person like you, what need is there to talk about rules? Ling Han shot an arrow. He was also extremely furious. Small Saber King cold-bloodedly killed the people of 2 villages, and Ling Han clearly knew that shooting this arrow would only make Small Saber King look even more miserable, but he still decided to waste it. Xiao, the arrow turned into a streak of white light and shot out like a flying dragon in the sky. Small Saber King was helpless, and could only brandish his saber to parry. His butt was bare, and that appearance was truly miserable to the extreme. "Ling Han, if I don't kill you, I swear I'm not human, Pu. He hadn't finished his vicious words when he had no choice but to squat down again and suck to his heart's content. Kill me, then I'll kill you. Ling Han snorted, and didn't attack again, instead turning to leave. Small Saber King still had a diamond puppet, and they should be searching for him separately. A long time had already passed, and Small Saber King probably summoned the puppet through a secret technique. If he didn't leave now, he'd have to hide in the Black Tower again. He used the demon fairy step to move into the distance, and from afar, he seemed to be able to hear the thunderous sounds of diarrhea. Spiritual infant tier cultivators were so strong in this aspect. 3 days later, Ling Han arrived at a city. The patterns on the vial of curses were already dim and lightless, and Small Saber King's drop of blood was already exhausted, so he couldn't be cursed anymore. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh inwardly in pity. If he could make Small Saber King have diarrhea until he died, it'd be a relief. He summoned both Zhu Xian'er and Hun Yo. The three of them walked on the streets, but very soon, they saw people pointing at them and talking about them. After a while, Ling Han discovered that his and Hun Yo's portraits were plastered all over the city. This was a bounty notice, saying that whoever found their whereabouts and provided information would receive a large reward. However, the bounty notice only had his and Hun Yo's portraits, and didn't have their names. Obviously, the bounty was issued by Small Saber King, but presumably, he still had some misgivings, not daring to mention Ling Han's name. After all, Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist, and if you publicly issued a bounty, weren't you afraid of incurring the wrath of the Alchemist Society? He was only in the spiritual infant tier now, and hadn't advanced into the shattering void tier, so he could act recklessly. Ling Han hurriedly left with Hun Yo and Zhu Xian'er. As expected, not long after, Small Saber King caught up. He, Hun Yo, and Zhu Xian'er entered the Black Tower, changed their appearances with the disguise pill, and appeared openly. Ling Han. Just as they were about to leave the city, they saw Small Saber King charge over, targeting Ling Han and Hun Yo. With a slash of his saber, he was like a flying immortal. How did this guy discover their disguise? Ling Han was astonished, and hurriedly used the demon fairy step to dodge, while Hun Yo turned into a flash of lightning, charging towards Small Saber King. You want to use the same move twice in front of me? Small Saber King sneered. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 603. According to the speculation of predecessors, this is the spine of an alternative dragon, Helian Sun Shui said. The spine was the most important bone for both humans and demonic beasts. It was even more important than the skull. If this was a dragon's spine, then it was no wonder that it could connect heaven and earth. There's no dragon's might anymore. Ling Han pressed his hand on the sky-reaching tree. The bone patterns were lustrous white, and even if it had experienced who knew how many millennia, it was undamaged, but there was no longer a trace of an elite's aura circulating. Otherwise, if an important part like the spine casually released a trace of aura, an ordinary 9th layer shattering void tier cultivator would probably be suppressed to the point that their legs would go weak. Don't be careless. Although there's no dragon's might here, as long as you reach a certain level, there will be a pressure. Moreover, the higher you go, the more terrifying this pressure will be, Helian Sun Shui warned. As if to annotate her words, pang, a person fell from the sky. He fell solidly, and directly broke into pieces. This was a member of the sea race, not of the bloodline of a true dragon, but a prodigy of the willow octopus race. There wasn't a single bone in his body, and he was known for being able to take a beating and having strong recovery ability, yet he lost his life here. Ah! Another person fell, but this time he didn't die. However, at least half of the bones in his body were broken, and his blood flowed like a fountain. Very soon, the lower part of his body was dyed blood red. He struggled to his feet, and forcibly used his origin power to condense his broken bones. He took out a few alchemical pills and swallowed them, then sat down in a cross-legged position to refine the medicinal effects and recover from his injuries. This bone tree was really too big. Perhaps there were people falling from it at every instant, but due to the limitations of their field of vision, they couldn't see them. Are you going to enter the Black Tower? Ling Han asked Hellion Sun Shui. Heng, are you looking down on me? Hellion Sun Shui asked in displeasure. She was the Pearl of the North Sea, after all, and her present battle prowess might even be above Ling Han's. Ling Han raised his hand, smiled, and said, "Sigh, you don't know how to appreciate my kindness. Wasn't I just concerned about you, and wanted you to slack off a little? No need." Hellion Sun Shui immediately began to climb the bone tree. Her speed was extremely fast, and in an instant, she had already rushed up over 300 meters. However, her speed very quickly slowed down. "Hunyo, let's go too." N. Hunyo nodded crisply, and climbed up together with Ling Han. Sure enough, after ascending about 300 meters, a faint pressure was emitted from the bone tree. Because no one could fly here, they could only climb up the tree. They had to hold on to the tree trunk tightly, and had to resist this kind of pressure at all times. Facing this kind of level of pressure, Ling Han and Hunyo naturally didn't take it seriously in the slightest. They both turned into the light of lightning, and quickly climbed up the tree trunk, as fast as lightning. Hellion Sun Shui wasn't slow, either. She not only learned the thunderclap ninth heaven, she herself was also a super genius, and her talent was not the slightest bit inferior to Su Xiu, Ran and the others. After more than an hour, they surpassed a lot of people along the way. Some were fine, minding their own business as they climbed up, but some actually wanted to attack Ling Han and the others. Ling Han obviously wouldn't be polite, and attacked without mercy, shaking these people who couldn't control their hands off the tree. Whether they lived or died would depend on their fate. The speed of Ling Han and the others became slower and slower. They had now climbed over 2/3 of the height, and the dragon's might was also becoming stronger and stronger, causing Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to sweat. Only Hunyo acted as if nothing had happened. One moment, she would fly very high, and the next moment, she would climb down again, urging Ling Han to hurry up. Ling Han thought that if an ambush was carried out at the entrance of the third layer, the effect would be great, and the possibility of falling for it would be over 90%. However, this spine was too big, and who knew where the target would come from? Thus, if they wanted to set up an ambush, they would need at least a few thousand people to form a circle on top. Moreover, every one of them would have to have the battle prowess of the peak stage of the heaven tier. Otherwise, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to Ling Han. However, Hunyo was not affected by the dragon's might in the slightest. With this scout here, who could ambush Ling Han? Their speed became slower and slower, but after another 2 hours, the three of them still climbed to the top of the bone tree, and entered the third layer of the ghostly dragon cave. The environment here was different again. All around them were bare mountain rocks, but every rock was crimson in color. From afar, it looked like a land of blood, and also like a burning sea of fire. Crimson was the main color of this place, and there were no other colors aside from that. Dracaena also grows in the cracks of rocks. Though they had already harvested more than 100 stalks, and there was still a large amount of blood locust tree hearts, such treasures would never be too much no matter how many there were. Ling Han nodded. The three of them searched as they advanced, but did not waste any time on the way. After all, the main point of this trip was the true dragon's tooth. This was the most valuable treasure. They did not want to waste too much time here, and if the ghostly dragon cave closed, they would all be expelled. Then, it would be a matter of 500 years later if they were to enter again. Their luck was not bad, and they had many gains along the way. This was naturally because Ling Han had activated the Eye of Truth, and could see everything clearly, no matter how big or small, which naturally greatly increased their gains. However, in this way, their speed would definitely be affected, but every time the ghostly dragon cave opened, there would be at least half a month's time. They had only used 5 days so far, so no matter what, they still had about 10 days left. There's a big guy in front. Ling Han withdrew his gaze, and even rubbed his eyes. These few days, he had continuously used the eye of truth, causing his eyes to feel a little sore, and it was quite uncomfortable. Could it be a demonic ape? Hellion Sun Shui mumbled to herself. Seeing the doubtful expression on Ling Han's face, she explained, the monsters on the third floor are mainly a kind of ape-like creature, but according to speculation, this could be the fleas on the alternative dragon's body, which have absorbed the dragon's blood and transformed. Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange, and he said, such a powerful existence like the alternative dragon would also have fleas? Of course not when it was in its prime, but in its later years, its qi and blood would decline, and it might not even be able to move a finger, so it would be very normal for it to have fleas, Hellion Sun Shui said. The lifespan of the dragon race was very long. Even in its later years, when it still had one last breath left, it might need 8 to 10 years before it would truly die, so it would not be strange for it to have some parasites. Just like the bloodworm on the first floor, it was probably because its qi and blood had declined in its later years, and a strange change had occurred. The fleas actually absorbed the dragon's blood and could actually grow to a height of over 30 meters. That's quite rare, Ling Han said with a smile. However, this large flea is sitting there without moving, as if guarding some kind of treasure. Maybe it's another dragon's blood grass. Come, let's go. They advanced, and not long after, they saw that there was indeed a gigantic crimson monster squatting in front of them. It was shaped like an ape, yet it had 6 legs, and indeed looked more like a flea. And under this monster's body was a gigantic blood-colored stone, which had a much deeper luster than the other stones. Hellion Sun Shui was slightly excited, and said, could it be the true dragon's bloodstone? Chapter 604. Fuck, the heavens also like to give people surprises? Ling Han said, and his figure immediately leaped out, flying outside the city. He immediately used the secret technique of the thunderclap 9th heaven, and his body obtained some kind of special connection with the thunderclouds in the sky. Quang, the first bolt of lightning struck down, striking straight at Ling Han as if it was deliberately aimed at him. The power of lightning entered his body, and Ling Han was instantly charred on the outside and tender on the inside. This was the power of heaven and earth. How terrifying was it? It could instantly blast Ling Han into a piece of charcoal. Fortunately, he wasn't a mortal, but in the flower blossom tier, and not a normal flower blossom tier, but one that cultivated body of iron sheet, and his physique was comparable to rare metal of the same tier. Even so, Ling Han almost immediately fainted, but he bit his tongue. If he fainted now, then all the suffering he just suffered would have been in vain. He hurriedly operated the thunderclap 9th heaven, guiding the power of lightning to flow through his body, transforming his body with the secret technique. Quang, another bolt of lightning fell. Ling Han became the center of the lightning, and under the operation of the thunderclap 9th heaven, every bolt of lightning was mysteriously guided, striking towards him. Fuck, I haven't even entered the heaven tier, and I'm already struck by lightning. Ling Han gritted his teeth. The feeling of being struck by lightning wasn't pleasant at all. Fortunately, this was only a normal bolt of lightning. The heavenly might during the tribulation was much stronger. The indestructible heaven's scroll also operated, dissolving the damage he suffered. This was an advantage that others couldn't compare to. He tried his best to not lose his mind, operating the secret technique of the thunderclap 9th heaven to reform his body. The power of lightning coursed through the meridians and flesh in his body, and was used by the secret technique to change Ling Han's physique. This was actually quite dangerous. If he couldn't hold on, he might be struck unconscious by the lightning, and if he was struck a few more times, then a normal flower blossom tier warrior would definitely die completely. Even if he didn't die, the power of lightning rampaging through his body could cause massive damage. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if there was no damage, at the very least, his attempt to use the power of lightning to transform his body would be a complete failure. Ling Han forcefully endured the pain of being electrocuted. It really made him want to pass out and not bear such pain anymore. However, in order to become stronger, he gritted his teeth and continued to circulate his secret technique, attracting even more power of lightning to strike over and enter his body. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. His entire body turned into a ball of white light. Hun You and Zhu Xian'er watched from afar. Zhu Xian'er's face was filled with worry, but Hun You was completely unconcerned, and said, "Don't worry, Niu's Ling Han will definitely be able to pull through." Zhu Xian'er hugged Hun You and nodded, but she was still very worried. After all, concern would cause confusion, and she was not as careless as Hun You. No matter what, Hun You was only a little girl. Thunder wasn't strange, but it was strange that all the lightning always fell in the same direction. Soon, people ran over to investigate. Most were low-level martial artists, only spiritual pedestal and spiritual ocean. Even if they discovered it, it was useless. They didn't dare to approach Ling Han at all. Who could resist the might of heaven and earth? Hun You began to chase them away. As her small fists danced, she sent them flying. "What do you guys want to do to Niu's Ling Han?" She looked like she was protecting her child. She was too powerful, and even spiritual infant-tier warriors found it hard to suppress her, let alone these people. Instantly, they scattered like birds and beasts. However, not long after, elites also began to appear. Lightning fell densely in the same place. Could it be that a precious treasure was born? These people thought. Xiao, 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 7 flower blossom tier warriors came. The old one was already over 70, and the younger ones were over 40. After all, even the middle state couldn't be full of geniuses, with 20 flower blossom tier warriors appearing at every turn. At this time, more than a dozen bolts of lightning had already fallen. Ling Han's entire body was covered by lightning, and lightning was so terrifying that no one's vision or divine sense could penetrate it under the denseness. Thus, everyone could only see a sea of lightning, but didn't know what was inside. It must be the birth of a precious treasure that attracted the simultaneous lightning strikes. When the lightning dissipates, we'll immediately start seizing the treasure. The 7 people's eyes were burning. This was a small city, and nothing usually happened, but today, dense lightning suddenly fell from the sky and weaved into a sea of lightning, which meant the birth of a precious treasure, which naturally made them excited. Perhaps this was a turning point, and from now on, they would all walk on the path of meteoric success. However, this lightning seemed to have no end, continuously bombarding without end. A day later, another 10 flower blossom tier warriors appeared. 9 Cloud City's 7 flower blossom tier warriors instantly acted as if they were facing a great enemy, and said, "What are you guys from Great Universe City doing here?" "Ha, a precious treasure was born, and your 9 Cloud City wants to monopolize it?" Great Universe City's flower blossom tier snorted. It was born in our 9 Cloud City, so it naturally belongs to our 9 Cloud City," 9 Cloud City's flower blossom tier warrior retorted. "A precious treasure of heaven and earth, how can it belong to anyone? Moreover, isn't this outside 9 Cloud City?" Just a few flower blossom tier warriors, and you dare to be impudent in my 9 Cloud City?" 9 Cloud City's spiritual infant tier warrior appeared. A few days ago, he was scared out of his wits by the diamond puppet, but now he had the bearing of a peerless elite. Once the spiritual infant tier warrior appeared, Great Universe City's flower blossom tier warriors immediately shut their mouths obediently. Even if there were 10 of them, it was useless. In front of a spiritual infant tier warrior, at least a dozen people couldn't fill such a gap. Lord Ma is so awe-inspiring." A voice suddenly sounded, and a slender middle-aged man walked out, his entire body flickering with a terrifying radiance. Zhang Wuyun. 9 Cloud City's spiritual infant tier warrior's eyes narrowed, the other was also in the spiritual infant tier. "A precious treasure of heaven and earth, those who see it are fated." Zhang Wuyun smiled faintly. "Ma Zaifang, if you want the treasure, then we'll have to rely on our own abilities." "Then let's fight." Ma Zaifang moved, attacking the opponent. Meanwhile, The flower blossom tier cultivators of Nine Cloud City also charged towards the flower blossom tier cultivators of Great Universe City. No matter what, they had to leave this treasure in Nine Cloud City. Peng, 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 they instantly fought fiercely. Zhu Xian'er was astonished, and was even more amused inwardly, thinking what expressions they would have when they discovered that the lightning wasn't some precious treasure at all, but only Ling Han. Hunyo almost flew into a rage, afraid that these people would disturb Ling Han. Fortunately, these people's battle didn't affect Ling Han's side, or else the little girl would definitely make a move. Ling Han was already gradually entering an optimal state. The power of lightning circulated within his body, and his entire person seemed to have transformed into lightning, becoming a blazing white lightning. Even the essence of his life underwent a change. The intense pain from before already disappeared, and now he became more and more relaxed, even enjoying the bombardment of lightning as if it was giving him a massage. Drawing lightning into the body, transforming one's body. Success. Ling Han smiled faintly, stopping the activation of the mystic technique, and the lightning that filled the sky finally dissipated. This originally shouldn't have lasted so long, but due to the influence of the mystic technique, the thunderclap ninth heaven, there was an interaction that lasted until now. He looked inside his body, wanting to see the specific changes, but when his divine sense swept over his dantian, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Chapter 605. Ling Han was a chaos lotus of 5 elements. His spiritual root had 5 different attributes and reached a perfect balance. Therefore, he could absorb 5 types of spiritual energy at the same time without any kind of spiritual energy being too strong. But now, the 5 lotus petals were still there, but the lotus roots had actually turned into lightning. His spirit root now had another attribute, thunder. Moreover, this did not affect the balance of the 5 elemental spiritual roots. It was just that on this basis, it allowed him to possess the lightning attribute. Ling Han was astonished. This spiritual root could actually be modified after birth. In his previous life, he had entered many historical sites and obtained many high-level cultivation methods and martial techniques. However, when it came to divine abilities, he did not have a single one. In this life, his luck was heaven-defying. Now, he had already obtained 3 mystic arts. Divine power can change a person's constitution, change a person's spiritual root. Ling Han was astounded. This had shattered his understanding. If this were to develop, then wouldn't it mean that one could artificially form a spirit base of 5 elements, or a spirit base of 6 elements? They only needed to cultivate different mystical powers. In that case, his 6 elemental spirit root wasn't that amazing, because it could be modified later on. Perhaps he didn't even need to cultivate divine abilities, and a powerful existence could be created with one hand. What was changing the heavens and earth? Defying the heavens and changing one's fate? Ling Han secretly nodded his head. He was no longer proud of his spiritual roots, because in the future, there might be many geniuses like him with 6 elemental spiritual roots. However, the 6 elemental spiritual root was already standing at the peak, so there was no need for him to lower himself in front of anyone. With a thought, his body immediately flashed with the light of thunder, as if he was about to transform into lightning. The thunderclap ninth heaven, he could be considered to have crossed the threshold. The lightning that filled the sky dissipated, and Ling Han's figure also appeared. This involuntarily caused the people who were fighting fiercely on both sides to stop, and simultaneously move towards him. Where's the treasure? He must have taken it. Instantly, the experts of the 2 cities stared at Ling Han with cold eyes, as if they wanted to eat him alive. Hey, why are you guys looking at me like that? I'm not used to your gazes, said Ling Han with a smile. Brat, hand over the treasure. These people all charged over. Previously, they had wanted to force the other party to flee so that they could keep the treasure for themselves. But now, they had a common enemy. It's just as well. I'll use you guys to test out this technique. Ling Han laughed out loud. His body flashed with lightning, and his speed was ridiculously fast. Bam! He threw a punch, and lightning overflowed. Peng, 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 close to 20 flower blossom tier cultivators were sent flying by his punch, leaving only 2 spiritual infant tier cultivators still chasing after him. This also caused the 2 great spiritual infant tier elites to be extremely shocked. This brat was so strong, the might of a single punch was almost no weaker than that of a spiritual infant tier. Ling Han revealed a smile. The thunderclap ninth heaven was indeed a divine ability from an ancient dynasty. His current battle prowess should have crossed into 20 stars, advancing into the level of the spiritual infant tier. Brat, hand over the treasure, and we'll spare your life, the 2 great spiritual infant tier warriors shouted at the same time. Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "Spare my life? You speak as if you are very powerful. Come, 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 I'll play with you guys to see who's more powerful." A mere flower blossom tier cultivator dares to be so impudent. Zhang Wuyun and Ma Zifang both snorted, and grabbed towards Ling Han. This shocking thunder bombarded for an entire day, so the secret treasure that came into being was definitely extraordinary. The 2 of them had been stuck in this tier for a long time, wanting to break through even in their dreams, and this secret treasure might be related to whether they could break through or not. Niu will help you. Hu Niu couldn't help but be eager to fight. Ling Han laughed, and said, "No need, no need. It's just these 2 people, I can handle them." He threw a punch, and 22 dragon images appeared, interwoven with lightning, appearing even more ferocious. Such a freakish brat! Zhang Wuyun and Ma Zifang both exclaimed. Ling Han actually formed 21 flashes of qi, truly too terrifying. There's something even more powerful. Ling Han laughed loudly, and attached his bone patterns. The Eye of Truth was activated, and he launched a frenzied attack at the 2 great spiritual infant tier cultivators. His battle prowess was originally close to 20 stars, and now that he cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven, he instantly crossed this limit, finally truly possessing the battle prowess of the spiritual infant tier. With the Eye of Truth activated, even if Zhang Wuyun and Ma Zifang were both in the 7th tier of the spiritual infant tier, they almost had no power to fight back, and were continuously bombarded by him. Mystical power. Why was it called mystical power? Exterminating Dragon Star Arrow plus the Eye of Truth could kill a spiritual infant tier cultivator with 1 arrow. Now, the thunderclap ninth heaven plus the Eye of Truth, although it wasn't as surprising as archery, its power wasn't inferior, but it couldn't achieve the effect of an ultimate kill. The 2 great spiritual infant tier cultivators were forced to continuously retreat, and their faces were filled with expressions of disbelief. This was truly too inconceivable. They were not only in the spiritual infant tier, but also in the 7th tier, stepping into the ranks of the high tier, but they were still bombarded by Ling Han to the point where they couldn't fight back. Ling Han roared again and again, his fists punching even more fiercely. 22 dragon elephants actually fused together, turning into a faint golden dragon elephant. Its entire body was erupting with lightning, and there were also several ancient symbols faintly discernible. It didn't look like something from the mortal realm at all, but rather from the demonic realm of hell. This dragon elephant was too terrifying. Under its heavy suppression, the 2 great spiritual infant tier cultivators could only retreat in defeat. Condense qi into ray. Zhang Wuyun and Ma Zifang both exclaimed. They didn't realize that this was a fake ray, and only thought that Ling Han had advanced into the 2nd level of fist arts. This step was truly too difficult to cross. Even if their tier was higher, the qi that they had formed now was still only 9 flashes. With less than 10 flashes, how could he have the right to condense ray? This made them extremely envious. Ling Han was only in the flower blossom tier and was only in his 20s, yet he had already formed over 20 flashes of qi, and even condensed them into ray, making their eyes explode with envy. The more they fought, the more flustered they became. Finally, their fighting spirit crumbled, and they separately turned to run. What treasure? They didn't want it anymore. Ling Han didn't pursue them. He didn't have any irreconcilable grudge with these two, and fighting with them was only to test the thunderclap ninth heaven's power, and the result made him very satisfied. His speed now increased explosively by 3 times, and his battle prowess increased by more than 5 stars. This also made him very apprehensive. If Small Saber King obtained this mystical power, Small Saber King would probably really be invincible in the spiritual infant tier, and could even sweep through deity transformation tier warriors. Since that kind of genius already had 1 foot in the deity transformation tier, then he definitely already possessed deity transformation tier battle prowess, there was no doubt about this. However, the ancient dynasty had a total of 4 mystical powers, and this thunderclap ninth heaven wasn't the strongest. It was truly hard to imagine how inconceivable the 9 Deaths Heaven art was. If I encounter Small Saber King again now, I probably still won't be a match, but running shouldn't be a problem. Ling Han muttered to himself. Although his speed only increased by 3 times, combined with ghosts and immortals, even deity transformation tier cultivators would find it hard to catch up to him. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 606. When martial artists advanced a level, the increase in power was 10 times, 100 times, but for speed, it was already good to be able to double it. Thus, Ling Han cultivated a body of lightning, which increased his speed by 3 times, and added with the demon fairy step, this already surpassed the level of the spiritual infant tier, and stepped into the height of the deity transformation tier. However, running isn't a problem. I still have to break through to the spiritual infant tier as soon as possible, then I'll truly have the qualifications to fight against Small Saber King. Sigh, this life's level of martial art is really too high. If it was in the previous life, with my current strength, only Sword Emperor and the others would be qualified to fight against me, and at least an old monster over 100 years old would be able to suppress me. Now it's great. Geniuses under 100 years old are like bamboo shoots after the rain, emerging endlessly. Hee, but this will give me enough motivation. I just cultivated a body of lightning, and can't truly transform into lightning yet, but I'm not far from this step. At that time, my battle prowess will be even stronger. Ling Han walked to Hunyou and Zhu Xian'er's side, revealed a smile, and said, "Let's go, we should also go to Thousand Flower County and meet the geniuses of the present age." "Let's go." Hunyou jumped and said happily. Staying here for many days, she was very bored. Unfortunately, their golden ship was destroyed by the diamond puppet, and now they didn't have a means of transportation, so they could only walk on their 2 legs. They didn't bother to find a carriage, so they just walked like that. To reduce trouble, they all disguised themselves. Ling Han originally wanted to disguise the 3 of them as husband and wife with an adorable daughter, but Hunyou was unwilling no matter what. Thus, they could only disguise themselves as 3 siblings. Ling Han became a few years older, Zhu Xian'er's beautiful face was covered, and Hunyou's face became a little flowery. Ling Han also specially circulated an ancient art. It didn't have much effect, only making the aura he emitted become much weaker, reaching the spiritual ocean tier. This way, if Small Saber King could still find him, then he truly had the ability. They left 9 Cloud City and set out towards Thousand Flower County. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry. The opening of the Great Antiquity Academy was just a rumor. The actual entrance exam was still far away. At the very least, from what he heard in 9 Cloud City, the date of the exam had yet to be decided. No matter how he thought about it, it had to be at least half a year's time. Otherwise, with the vastness of the lower realm, many people wouldn't be in a hurry to rush over. They walked leisurely. After all, this was also cultivation. Ling Han paused for a moment and turned his head to look behind him. He saw a cloud of dust rising behind him, and a group of people was quickly approaching. He first thought that Small Saber King had caught up again, but immediately realized that something was wrong. These people were only in the flower blossom tier. There were a total of 7 people, and they were extremely fast. Very soon, they caught up to Ling Han and the others, and without even pausing, they continued forward. Ling Han's gaze swept over, and couldn't help but reveal an expression of shock as he said, "Can ye?" Among the group of people, one of them immediately stopped and turned around. His figure was tall and slender, and his whole body emitted a sharp saber chi, like a sharp unsheathed blade. He looked at Ling Han in surprise, his eyes filled with doubt. It was Ken Yi. After not seeing for a long time, he actually broke through to the flower blossom tier and walked his own path, becoming extremely confident. "I'm Ling Yun," Ling Han said with a smile. Hearing this name, Ken Yi immediately understood that this was Ling Han, and a hint of joy instantly appeared on his face. "Ken Yi, what's the matter?" a red-clothed woman asked. She was extremely beautiful, with beautiful hair like clouds and skin as smooth as jade, glowing brilliantly under the sunlight like a goddess. Ken Yi didn't speak yet, but Ling Han came up first and laughed loudly. "Meeting an old friend in a foreign land, I'm Ling Yun, Ken Ye's fellow townsman." "Oh." The red-clothed woman and the others all nodded. So it was just a fellow townsman. These 6 people were all dragons and phoenixes among men, bearing out of the ordinary and having soaring self-confidence. Obviously, they came from a prestigious clan. They saw that Ling Han was only in the spiritual ocean tier, so they obviously wouldn't take another look. If it weren't for Ken Yi refusing to leave, they definitely would have turned and left. This kind of person didn't belong to the same world as them. "Young Master Ling." Ken Yi was extremely excited. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "You call me Young Master Ling, isn't that asking me to call you Young Master Yi as well? I'm not as thick-skinned as you." Ken Yi understood that Ling Han didn't want to be ostentatious, so he smiled, and no longer insisted on calling Ling Han Young Master. The red-clothed woman and the others were a bit indignant. "What right did a mere spiritual ocean tier have to call you Young Master with them, and you actually became cocky and pretentious? Where did your confidence come from? Ken Yi, let's set off quickly. I've already received definite news that the Restore Heaven Academy will officially open in half a year. If we go earlier, we might know the contents of the exam and be prepared," one person urged. "Oh, there's still half a year before the Restore Heaven Academy opens," Ling Han interrupted. Fine, he could use this gap to search for the whereabouts of the Boundless Mountain. "What does it have to do with you?" A pretty boy looked at Ling Han impatiently, revealing a look of disdain. Could it be that this brat also wanted to go to the Restore Heaven Academy? What a joke. He was already in his 20s, but still only in the spiritual ocean tier. If he could enter the Restore Heaven Academy like that, wouldn't that be a joke? They accepted all the elites of the world, geniuses among geniuses, and only people like them had the right to enter. Cho Zifei, what do you mean by this? Ken Yi walked towards the pretty boy awe-inspiringly, and unhesitatingly drew his long saber, aiming at that person. "Ken Yi, you actually drew your saber against this young master for such a piece of trash?" The pretty boy called Cho Zifei's face was full of astonishment. He completely didn't think that Ken Yi would actually fall out with him for a mere spiritual ocean tier. "Apologize," Ken Yi said coldly, his gaze like a saber, full of killing intent. In his eyes, Ling Han was his benefactor, and even more so the idol he worshipped. Cho Zifei actually dared to look down on Ling Han, so it obviously made his killing intent blaze. "Ken Yi, your talent isn't bad, that's why I befriended you. Don't think that you're really qualified to be on equal footing with this young master." Cho Zifei's expression also turned cold. Young people were the most proud and arrogant, so he obviously wouldn't lower his head. Forget it, we're all friends, why make things unpleasant?" A man came out to smooth things over, and said with a smile, "Since we're all going to the Restore Heaven Academy, then let's go together." Cho Zifei immediately wanted to object, actually wanting to travel with such a minor character, but before he could voice his objection, he was stopped by a man, who whispered in his ear, "Isn't it rather interesting to toy with this brat?" When he heard that, he immediately gave up on the idea of objecting, and merely looked coldly at Ling Han, thinking that he would definitely embarrass this guy enough, and then he would dejectedly leave on his own accord. Although Ken Yi didn't want to let it go, seeing that Ling Han also shook his head, he put away the long saber, and the situation was considered to have eased up. Chapter 607. Ling Han rushed to the agreed place with Hun Yo, and saw that the little girl had already arrived long ago. She was currently sitting on a rock, swinging her legs in boredom. Her small mouth was pouting, and she appeared to be very unhappy. When she discovered that Ling Han had arrived, she humphed, and said, "Ling Han, you're too slow. You made Nyo wait for so long, sorry." Ling Han hurriedly smiled, and said, "Nyo has been a great help this time." Hun Yo instantly turned from annoyance to joy. Clapping her hands, she said, "Nyo is the best. Nyo is indeed the best." Ling Han rubbed Hun Yo's head. This little girl was really too special. Harvest first. Ling Han and Hun Yo entered into the Black Tower together, and called Hellion Sun Shui over. She was currently carrying Ling Jian Shui, and together, they arrived in front of the gigantic True Dragon's Bloodstone. Ya. Ling Jian Shui waved his small hands and feet, and was about to struggle out of Hellion Sun Shui's embrace. Ling Han was startled. Can the little guy feel the power of the True Dragon's Bloodstone? He paused, and said, "Sun Shui, let go of him. There naturally wouldn't be any problems inside the Black Tower." Hellion Sun Shui placed her son on the ground as told. The little guy immediately used both his hands and feet, and ran towards the True Dragon's Bloodstone. Although he hadn't reached 1 year old yet, his brute force was extremely shocking, and his speed was astonishingly fast. Very soon, he ran in front of the True Dragon's Bloodstone, and climbed up step by step. When he reached the top, he comfortably lay on top, just like that Flea King from before. Ling Han immediately noticed that there were multiple dragon patterns flickering on the little guy's body, emitting a faint radiance and emitting dragon's might. Moreover, it was continuously strengthening. Absorbing the True Dragon's blood, continuously becoming stronger. For the descendants of the True Dragon, this True Dragon's blood was definitely a rare treasure, and perhaps even irreplaceable. Ling Han walked over, and pressed his hand onto the True Dragon's Bloodstone. Immediately, the 9 dragons' tyrant body art automatically circulated, extracting the essence within the bloodstone to strengthen his body, slightly strengthening his physique, and greatly increasing his power. He had an urge to completely extract the energy within the bloodstone, allowing his brute force to instantly soar to the heaven tier, or even stronger. He hurriedly restrained himself. Increasing power too quickly wasn't a good thing, he needed to have a mental state that was sufficient to control this power. However, he was only in the heaven tier in his last life, and his battle prowess couldn't be considered strong at all. In fact, it couldn't even compare to his current state, and he no longer had the advantage of mental state. It could be said that aside from advancing into the heaven tier, which was still the same old path, he had already surpassed his last life in all aspects, and this time was merely over 5 years, which made him feel like he was dreaming when he thought about it. After reaching the peak of the deity transformation tier, he needed to properly consolidate his cultivation level before breaking through. He couldn't leave any regrets behind, or else it could possibly cause a great impact. Ling Han withdrew his hand, and said, "Small tower, will there be any problems with this brat absorbing the True Dragon's blood like this?" Small tower appeared, and said indifferently, "His physique isn't bad, much stronger than yours. You'd better die quickly, so that your son inherits the Black Tower will definitely be more outstanding than you." Fuck. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. Even if you're praising my son, you don't have to belittle me like this, right? This Tsundere Tower, one day, I'll make it kneel down and admit defeat. However, it was fine as long as there were no problems. This brat would just lie there and continuously absorb the True Dragon's blood. He really didn't know what heights his brute force could reach when he activated his spirit base. Flower Blossom Tear. Spiritual Infant Tear, Ling Han and the others exited the Black Tower. The most precious treasure was naturally the true dragon's tooth. In comparison, the others were all sesame seeds. Even this piece of true dragon's blood stone could only be considered a slightly larger sesame seed. Ong! They had just exited the Black Tower when they heard a terrifying furious roar reverberate, shaking their skin to the point that it was rippling like water. It was that Flea King. When it returned and discovered that the true dragon's blood stone was gone, it was obviously driven mad, roaring furiously as if it wanted nothing more than to destroy this heaven and earth. Let's go. Ling Han and the others hurriedly left. This Flea King that was at the level of a 15-eyed corpse king was practically seeking its own death. That was something that only an idiot would do. After running for over 50 kilometers, the ripples in the air were no longer able to affect them, even though there were still furious roars ringing in the air. This was the Shattering Void Tear, capable of injuring a Heaven Tier level elite with a single roar. After walking for another few hundred miles, the furious roar finally disappeared completely, allowing the three of them to breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this big guy didn't pursue them everywhere. Otherwise, if they were targeted by it, would they be able to block the Revere Life Sword's awakening? They didn't deliberately search for true dragon bloodstone, dragon's blood grass, or other spirit medicines and treasures. Now, their eyes were fixed on the true dragon's tooth. After all, they didn't know how much time they would spend on the 4th floor. After another 2 days, they arrived at the end of the 3rd floor. There was no passageway or tall mountain formed by bones here, only a seemingly ordinary door that connected to a completely different world. On the other side was a sea of flames. Hee hee, I've finally waited for you. With a cold laugh, Su Xiu ran and the others also appeared one after another, blocking the passageway at the entrance. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, I've made you guys wait for a long time, I'm really sorry. No matter, just use your life as compensation, the small sword emperor said coldly. Then I'm even more sorry. I value my own life very much, and do not have the slightest intention of handing it over to anyone. Ling Han looked at the 4 people, his gaze cold. In a battle based on his own strength, he was not afraid of these 4 people. Even if his battle prowess was inferior, with his physique, he could recover endlessly, and become the one who had the last laugh. But everyone possessed battle prowess that surpassed their cultivation level. What absolute saber, mountain and river axe? Perhaps he would have to bring over the Flea King from before to be able to match them. He immediately made a decision. He was going to directly barge in and get the true dragon's tooth first. As for these 4 people, he could deal with them later. Die! Su Xiu Ren immediately drew out the absolute saber, and the Son of Lightning also drew out the mountain and river axe, raising it high in his hand. This treasured tool had already awakened, and was exuding an extremely domineering aura. Ling Han drew Helian Sun Shui and Hun Yo into the Black Tower. In any case, the 4 of them already knew that he had a spatial divine tool, so it didn't matter if he used it in front of them. You want to barge in by force? You're too naive, the small sword emperor said with a sneer. He, too, drew out a treasured sword. Under the circulation of sword intent, this treasured tool was awakened, exuding a sharp aura. Even if it hadn't reached the Shattering Void Tier, it wasn't far from it. Dong Ling also drew her sword. She hadn't grasped Sword Heart yet, but she had her own strong points. The power of her bloodline was activated, and 2 long wings unfurled behind her back. There was also a phoenix tail woven from light and shadow, as if she had turned into a colorful wind. The 4 great young king tiers joined forces to seal off the area, and added with the absolute saber and mountain and river axe, it could be said to be impregnable. Even if it was a Shattering Void Tier, not many people would be able to barge in by force. Ling Han drew out the Revere Life Sword, smiled, and said, Then I'll barge in for you guys. Chapter 608. Can Yi decisively attacked, slashing out with his saber and unleashing 9 flashes of saber chi. The saber intent was cold, like a god of death. He improved quickly as expected, already reaching 9 flashes of saber chi, and was only 1 step away from condensing ray. Martial art wasn't just about tier. Similarly, in the first layer of the flower blossom tier, some people only had 1 star of battle prowess, while others could reach 5 stars or even 10 stars. Kan Yi was only in the first layer of the flower blossom tier, but his battle prowess reached 7 stars. On one hand, he himself was talented, and on the other hand, it was the effect of the heavenly luck stone that allowed him to gain 5 stars of battle prowess. As the 9 flashes of saber chi crisscrossed, Kan Yi instantly tore apart the 4 beautiful women's encirclement and joined hands with Qin Yu, waving both saber and sword, instantly suppressing the 4 beautiful women. Originally, Qin Yu had the upper hand, not to mention now there was another Kan Yi whose strength wasn't much inferior to hers. In the carriage, Hu Qingfang's extremely displeased snort came, and he said, "Brat with a broken arm, you dare to ruin this young master's matter." Kan Yi wasn't a talkative person in the first place, and only brandished his saber, beating the 4 beautiful women into a sorry state. Such battle prowess made Chou Zifei and the others pale. They only knew that Kan Yi was very strong, which was why they accepted him as a member of their circle, but everyone was still quite conceited, thinking that they definitely couldn't be inferior to Kan Yi. Now, comparing the two's battle prowess, they were obviously shocked. "Many thanks," Qin Yu said. In battle, she couldn't salute, and only nodded at Kan Yi. Kan Yi was expressionless, extremely cold. Ling Han sighed. How could he pick up girls like this? She was grateful to you right now, so be gentler to her, and maybe they'd fall in love. Wasn't he going to be single like this? Courting death. A person shot out from the carriage. He looked to be in his early 20s, dressed in brocade and jade, and was quite handsome. However, the evil air on his face was too strong, and those eyes wished to tear off women's clothes. He was obviously Hu Qingfang. "Cripple, dare to ruin this young master's matter, you're truly tired of living, how can this young master suppress you?" Kan Yi brandished the long saber, his gaze cold, and said, "Then let's fight." His words were concise. He Lan Yun instantly revealed an infatuated expression. She liked Kan Ye's ice, cold yet fearless personality. However, making a move against the Wind Moon sect's young master, whether he won or lost, was inappropriate, making her worry again. A mere first-layer flower blossom tier cultivator dares to be impudent in front of this young master. Hu Qingfang sneered, and attacked Kan Yi. The weapon he used was a spiked club that was covered in symbols. Now that it was activated, it shone brightly and emitted a terrifying aura. Kan Ye's saber was still the 9-hoop Heaven Hero saber. This was a level 5 spirit tool, and could no longer keep up with his cultivation level. However, it couldn't be helped. He was only a martial artist who had just broken through to the flower blossom tier not long ago, so how could he possibly obtain a level 6 spirit tool? However, he was not afraid at all. He brandished his long saber, and a cold saber intent rushed towards Hu Qingfang. Ping, ping, pang, pang, the two fought. Hu Qingfang was indeed stronger. He was at the 7th layer of the flower blossom tier, and his battle prowess reached 10 stars, crushing Kan Yi by 3 stars. Moreover, the weapon in his hand was a level 6 spirit tool, so he obviously had the upper hand. However, Kan Yi was very tenacious, and repeatedly counterattacked in a disadvantageous situation. Using offense as defense, he desperately forced Hu Qingfang to stop his attacks, or else both sides would be injured. For Hu Qingfang, he obviously didn't want both sides to be injured. Firstly, his strength was higher, and secondly, what kind of status did he have? He was delicate and noble, so how could a lowly martial artist compare? It was precisely such misgivings that he couldn't defeat Kan Yi despite having the advantage in battle prowess, falling into a stalemate. Ling Han smiled faintly, and his hand quietly opened. An arrow of origin power condensed, and xiu, it shot towards Hu Qingfang. Now, no one noticed him. This arrow was condensed from origin power, and he deliberately darkened its color. Although its power was slightly reduced because of this, he didn't want to take Hu Qingfang's life. An arrow streaked past. Hu Qingfang wasn't on guard at all, and was shot on the knee, instantly staggering and almost falling. Ken Yi took the opportunity to slash, and shua, a flower of blood blossomed. Ah! Hu Qingfang screamed. This slash landed on his shoulder and almost broke his bones, causing him great pain. What made him even more depressed was that he actually didn't understand the situation. He felt his right leg go numb, and his limb deformed. What was this? Zhu Xian'er and Hu Niu went towards Ling Han. Others didn't notice because they didn't take Ling Han seriously at all, he was only a spiritual ocean tier minor character. They both smiled sweetly. As women, they obviously hated people like Hu Qingfang. However, Hu Qingfang's tier was higher, and his battle prowess was stronger, so this saber wound wasn't very serious. He soon rallied himself and charged back towards Ken Yi. Ling Han laughed inwardly. His right hand moved, and another annihilating dragon star arrow was shot out. His present battle prowess had already crossed into the spiritual infant tier, and even if he did not use a real bow, this annihilating dragon star arrow was extremely powerful, and added with the power of lightning that he attached, he saw through Hu Qingfang's weakness with the eye of truth. 3 great mystical powers attacked together, and Hu Qingfang should feel honored even if he was hit. Who had the face to be hit by 3 great mystical powers at the same time? Hu Qingfang staggered again, and was slashed by Ken Yi again. To others, it was as if Ken Yi had already anticipated that he would make such a mistake, waiting for him there in advance. They couldn't help but be shocked. This kind of control over the battle situation was too shocking. With this kind of foresight, Ken Yi obviously had the upper hand, and the advantage was greater than heaven, striking Hu Qingfang until he didn't want it anymore. After a few dozen moves, he escaped into the carriage and shouted, "Cripple, you dare oppose me, you're in big trouble." Ken Yi swept across his chest, and said, "Come out and fight." Hu Qingfang didn't dare to come out. He also thought that his leg's sudden numbness was some kind of secret technique used by the opponent, and he was already scared out of his wits. This brat didn't care about his identity as the Wind Moon sect's young sect master at all, slashing with every strike. If they fought again, he would really die here. "If I don't avenge this, I swear I'm not a man," he shouted. With a call, the 4 beautiful women returned to the carriage one after another. Ken Yi still wanted to pursue and attack, but a light shield rose up from the carriage, blocking him in his path. No need to pursue. That's the Wind Moon sect's ancient chariot, and if it's controlled by an elite, it can even display spiritual infant tier battle prowess. Qin Yu waved her hand and stopped Ken Yi, not letting him continue to pursue. Ken Yi, however, walked towards Ling Han, and after seeing Ling Han also shake his head, he put the saber back into the spatial ring. "Waiting for you," he said indifferently. Hu Qingfang roared angrily, but could only drive the carriage and rush back the way he came. Chapter 609. You've gotten into big trouble. Chou Zifei immediately shouted at Ken Yi. "Do you know who the other party is?" "Wind Moon sect's young sect master." "Wind Moon sect has a heaven tier elite overseeing it, can you afford to provoke such a force?" "That's right, you'll get us killed." Tsing Jiansun also said. Ken Yi sneered, and said, "If your wives, mothers, and daughters were in such a situation, could you guys also watch so coldly and say such words?" Everyone was silent, but the expression on their faces couldn't be more clear. Didn't they never encounter such a situation? What was the point in assuming? Qin Lianyu smiled, and said, "Although our Dark Glory Valley's overall strength isn't as good as Wind Moon sect's, it's not something they can casually bully." This matter is destined to be a grudge between the younger generation, and it's impossible for someone too strong to intervene, or else it'll trigger an all-out war between the two sections. Hearing her say so, everyone's hearts settled slightly. Let's go, this is still Wind Moon Sect's territory. Although it's not the core area, I heard there's a peak flower blossom tier elite overseeing it, and it's not easy to deal with. Qin Lianyu said again. Her temperament was elegant, she was beautiful, and she was born with the air of a leader, so she immediately became everyone's center and played a leading role. Everyone hurriedly nodded. This was still Wind Moon Sect's territory, so they quickly fled. They didn't dare to take the main road, and deviated into the forest on the side. They didn't fly either, as it consumed origin power and wasn't necessarily fast. They just ran on the ground, hidden, fast, and energy-saving. At night, they stopped to rest, and started a fire to roast dry rations and dried meat as they talked. So you guys are also going to the Restore Heaven Academy? Qin Lianyu listened to everyone, nodded, and said, I'm also going to the Restore Heaven Academy, and ended up encountering Hu Qingfang half a month ago. He kept pestering me, but fortunately, I encountered your help. Clearly, only Can Yi made a move, and the others even blamed him afterward, but she knew how to conduct herself, so she obviously wouldn't mention it and make the atmosphere awkward. Some people looked ashamed, while Chou Zifei was pleased with himself, as if it was really as the other said, that he had lent a hand in the time of danger, and that it wasn't even Can Yi who did it, but him. Miss Qin, you don't need to worry. If that Hu Qingfang dares to come again, I'll beat him into a sorry state, he said shamelessly. Who didn't know how to brag? In any case, it was to curry favor with a beauty, so he could brag to the heavens no matter how big the boast was. PFFF. The others still had some misgivings, and did not laugh out loud, but Hunyo did not know what it meant to give others face, and instantly burst into laughter. Little girl, what are you laughing at? Chou Zifei had boasted to the heavens, and what he was most afraid of was being exposed and slapped in the face. Therefore, when the little girl laughed like this, he became angry out of humiliation and glared at her. Isn't it funny? Can Yi drew his saber, glaring furiously at Chou Zifei. Such a cute girl. Qin Lianyu reached out to hug Hunyo. Although this little girl had a big flowery face painted, it still couldn't hide her mischievousness, and everyone who saw her loved her. Ugly girl, don't have the delusion of hugging Lord Nyo. Hunyo hurriedly retreated, looking like she was avoiding an inauspicious event. However, she obeyed Ling Han's orders and didn't use her power recklessly, so how could she avoid a middle-stage flower blossom tier cultivator's attack? She was instantly hugged by Qin Lianyu, and her small head was buried in Qin Lianyu's towering chest. Nyo's going to suffocate to death, ugly girl, hurry up and move your fat away from Nyo's face, or else Nyo's going to flip out. Hunyo danced and shouted. Chou Zifei and the other 4 men couldn't help but be envious, thinking that if they could switch places with Hunyo, instantly, blood almost spurted out of their noses. Qin Lianyu also couldn't help but laugh, and released her hands. Hunyo hurriedly fled behind Ling Han, hiding in his embrace, and said to Ling Han in a sweet voice, this ugly girl wants to smother Nyo to death with her fat, can Nyo beat her into a pig's head? Truly despicable, actually plotting to harm the cute Nyo. Having the fat on her chest mentioned twice, Qin Lianyu's pretty face blushed a little. This little girl was cute, but her words were too. What was fat? It was clearly 2 firm and upright mountain peaks. What did it have to do with fat? At most, they were a bit bigger. Qin Lianyu was still quite pleased with this, and sometimes felt pity for herself in the mirror, and even had a bit of hidden bitterness. Who knew which man would take advantage of her in the future? Ling Han smiled, and said, forget it, she also likes you, so be magnanimous and don't bicker with her. Hunyo bit her finger and thought for a while, then said, all right, Nyo is a magnanimous person, so I won't bicker with that ugly girl. She said so, but her gleaming eyes obviously didn't let it go so easily. The others didn't know what this little girl was capable of, and they all laughed loudly, feeling that children's words carried no harm. If they knew how terrifying Qin Lianyu, a middle-stage flower blossom tier warrior, was, they reckon she wouldn't dare say that. In terms of food, Hunyo definitely wouldn't mistreat herself. She took out the food from the spatial ring, which was vegetables grown in the Black Tower and beast meat raised. The taste was so fresh and delicious that it instantly made people salivate. Chou Zifei and the others already smelled it 3 days ago, but were too embarrassed to ask a little girl for food, so now they could only hurry up and swallow their saliva. However, Qin Lianyu really liked Hunyo. She walked over without minding, and said, "Beautiful Nyo, can you give big sister a piece?" Hunyo tilted her head and considered, then said, "All right." She separated a small piece of meat, wrapped it with raw vegetables, and handed it to Qin Lianyu, and said, "This is a new way of eating that Nyo invented, called vegetable-wrapped meat." Qin Lianyu opened her small mouth and directly bit this piece of vegetable-wrapped meat, slowly chewing. She originally just wanted to tease Hunyo and wasn't really greedy, but as she chewed, her pretty face immediately changed color. How could it be so delicious? The lightness of the vegetables fused with the roasted meat's fatness, complementing each other's advantages even more, stimulating her taste buds and making her feel as if she'd touched some kind of orgasm. Chapter 610. As expected, Qin Lianyu couldn't control herself at all towards such delicacies, and also liked little girls like Hunyo, so she lowered her status and begged for food from her. However, Hunyo wouldn't pay attention to her, minding her own business as she ate until the juices overflowed, making everyone continuously swallow their saliva. All right, with your pitiful appearance, I'll give you another piece." In the end, Hunyo gave another piece of meat to Qin Lianyu, still wrapped in vegetables, and passed it into Qin Lianyu's small mouth. She didn't have good intentions, still wanting Qin Lianyu to remember. The little girl was very vengeful. As expected, Qin Lianyu couldn't sleep that night. It was fine if she didn't taste the freshness, but after eating, she didn't have a full appetite, making her feel even more tormented. However, it also made her very curious as to what kind of meat this was, and how this vegetable was grown, for it to be so delicious. On the second day, Qin Lianyu stared at Ling Han, asking him about the origins of the beast meat and vegetables. Ling Han was annoyed, and said, "That's not beast meat, but human meat. As for vegetables, they're obviously grown with humans as fertilizer," he said it awe-inspiringly, making Qin Lianyu's pretty face twitch continuously, and she immediately retreated in defeat, making Hunyo hold her belly in laughter, feeling that she finally got her revenge. Qin Lianyu obviously wouldn't believe it. She'd never eaten human meat, but as a martial artist, how could she not have seen human meat? It wasn't like this. She could conclude that the beast meat she ate yesterday was aromatic deer, a beast meat known for its delicious meat. She'd eaten it many times, but none of them were as delicious as yesterday. She was truly worried that after eating yesterday's meat, would she have the appetite to eat anything else in the future? Chou Zifei and the others were very attentive to Qin Lianyu, surrounding her in every way possible to curry favor. Not only was this girl beautiful like a fairy, but her identity was also unordinary. She was the youngest disciple of the Dark Glory Valley's master. If one could marry her, then their own status would rise greatly, and even the family behind them would rise accordingly. In the world of martial art, the spiritual infant tier, the deity transformation tier, and the heaven tier, the difference between each tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and the hierarchy was extremely strict. The 5 of them only had backgrounds in the deity transformation realm, so they naturally wanted to gain connections with the direct disciples of the Dark Glory Valley. Moreover, just Qin Lianyu's absolute beauty was enough. However, how could Qin Lianyu pay attention to them? She was polite, but only for Kenya's sake, or else why would she pay attention to these greedy and cowardly people? Aside from martial arts, what she liked the most was to find all kinds of delicacies, so she obviously couldn't forget Hunyo's food, and found Zhu Xian air. In her opinion, this food definitely wasn't prepared by the little girl herself, so the adults by her side could only be Ling Han and Zhu Xian'er. However, Ling Han had already scared her off previously, so she obviously wouldn't go looking for trouble, so she could only look for Zhu Xian'er. It was unknown what the two girls said, but they both started laughing tenderly. Very soon, they became extremely intimate, causing both Ling Han and Hunyo to click their tongues in wonder. Women, truly strange creatures. Ling Han shrugged. Yeah. Hunyo gnawed on her food while revealing a distressed expression and said, that Nyo is so pitiful. If she grows up, she'll become such a strange woman, but if she doesn't grow up, how can she marry Ling Han? Ling Han laughed loudly, rubbed Hunyo's hair, and said, then Hunyo won't grow up, this is also quite good. There was always a knot in his heart. As Hunyo grew up, would that strange spirit base in her dantian replace her? That kind of existence was too terrifying. Just its might was enough to annihilate his heaven-tier divine sense, and Hunyo couldn't resist it at all. No, Nyo wants to marry Ling Han. Ling Han is Nyo's. Hunyo squeezed into Ling Han's embrace and hugged him tightly. Ah, you're going to strangle me to death. Ling Han cried out strangely. Hee hee. Hunyo laughed loudly. You guys are quite happy, huh? A cold laugh sounded, and a carriage actually flew over from the sky. With a turn, it stopped in front of them. The carriage that was 15 meters long and 9 meters tall was like a moving castle, and 4 beautiful women in revealing clothing sat in the driver's seat. Wind Moon sect, Hu Qing Fang. He was here again. However, before everyone could ask, they heard an extremely loud moan coming from inside the carriage, wave after wave, like a wave. This was a woman's moan, hysterical, and the carriage even had an extremely high frequency of vibration. Those who were experienced obviously knew what was going on once they heard it, and instantly stared. Doing that kind of thing was so high profile. Ling Han covered Hunyo's ears, and revealed a displeased expression as he said, Can ye? Yes. Can ye immediately answered, and pounced out, brandishing his saber to strike. Xiao, 9 flashes of saber chi shot out, and with the long saber, turned into 10 streaks of light, slicing towards the carriage. How dare you? The 4 beautiful women leaped out one after another, meeting Can Yi. Peng, 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 peng. In the fierce confrontation, the 4 beautiful women were defeated, but Can Ye's attack was also neutralized. Ah! A long exhalation came from inside the carriage, and the violently shaking carriage immediately stopped. A woman was heard saying, Young sect master's skills are getting better and better. This servant was almost killed by young sect master. Ha 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 ha. Hu Qing Fang's proud laughter came from inside the carriage. Men loved to hear praise from women like this the most. The carriage door opened, and 3 men and women actually walked out. It was actually a threesome before, really knowing how to play. Not only did the carriage shake, but also 3 people. The man was obviously Hu Qing Fang. He was bare-chested, wearing only a loose pair of underwear, and in his arms was a woman whose clothes didn't cover her body, revealing her breasts everywhere. Next to him stood another woman who looked to be in her early 30s, maintaining herself quite well. Her skin was snow-white and tender, round and plump, and her buttocks were perky, plump and round. She wore a loose skirt. At first glance, it was fine, but when the mountain wind blew, the hem of the skirt fluttered, and the inside was actually completely bare, enough to make people cover their faces in embarrassment. Yang Ying Shi. Yang Ying Yun. Qin Lian Yu exclaimed. Her gaze fell on the 2 women whose clothes didn't cover their bodies, revealing an intense fear. Be careful, these are the Wind Moon sect's 2 branch masters here, both at the peak of the flower blossom tier. TSK, 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 it's rare that Lady Qin still recognizes us sisters, what an honor. The standing beautiful woman said. She was Yang Ying Yun, and the other one still in Hu Qing Fang's arms was Yang Ying Shi. Which? Qin Lianyu said disdainfully, her eyes full of contempt. Yang Yingyun giggled and allowed the mountain breeze to blow on her body. She said, "What does a little girl who hasn't experienced the ways of the world know? A woman needs to be nourished by a man at all times in order to be beautiful. This way, Gidge, it's more convenient to do things." "Pervert," Qin Lianyu reprimanded. Ken Yi, however, gave a long howl and charged towards the carriage. The order he received was to kill. Phone reading was more refreshing. Su Xiu ran and the others should still be guarding the entrance, Ling Han said. "This time, there's no terrain advantage, so we'll have to fight it out." "Hey, this lord's." Helian Tianyun jumped out. He didn't believe that the world was full of freaks like Ling Han and Hunyou who weren't affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "Don't die right after you've been born. At least leave a few mystical powers for my son." "You jinx!" Helian Tianyun shouted in anger. Unfortunately, he no longer had the valor he once had, or else he would definitely teach this human a good lesson. He actually dared to look down on him, the great Lord Alternative Dragon. They arrived at the entrance, and sure enough, Su Xiu ran and the others had already discovered the commotion. They all stood up and blocked the entrance. Helian Tianyun swaggered a few steps forward, and humphed. "Juniors, why aren't you kneeling when you see this lord?" Su Xiu ran and the others already knew that Ling Han had a spatial divine tool, so they were naturally not surprised by the addition of a little brat and completely ignored him. Dong Ling said, "Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and the spatial divine tool. You should know that you definitely won't be able to leave this place alive." Helian Tianyun was furious. They were too despicable, again ignoring him. Moreover, if they wanted the true dragon's tooth, wasn't he the true dragon's tooth? He humphed. Wang, the dragon's might was unleashed, and it charged towards the four of them mightily. N. Yeah. Su Xiu ran and the others all let out a muffled groan. Under the pressure of the dragon's might, their faces all turned pale. Even if they were all rulers of martial arts, under such dragon's might, they still had a feeling of difficulty breathing. Wang, Su Xiu ran immediately revived the absolute saber, and an absolutely powerful saber intense circulated, instantly blocking the dragon's might. The son of lightning wasn't slow, either, and similarly drew out the mountain and river axe. This precious tool shone, and also blocked the dragon's might. Helian Tianyun couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth. His dragon's might was blocked again, so how could he endure this? Thankfully, these two juniors didn't block it with their own abilities, but with two spirit tools. Otherwise, he would really be crying. He stared at the two spirit tools for a while, and muttered, "Those are replicas of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe." With this recognition, he finally breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. The first master of the absolute saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, and that mountain and river axe was formed from the realm power and source power of this realm. Even if it was just a replica, it still had some special might, and it was reasonable that it could rival his dragon's might. Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning could resist the dragon's might, but the small sword emperor and Dong Ling couldn't. Even if they also had level 10 spirit tools bestowed by their elders, they had no effect on the dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon that had once been invincible in the world. Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning hurriedly guarded Dong Ling and the small sword emperor, lest Ling Han took the opportunity to kill them. In this way, their battle prowess instantly dropped to 2. Although they still had the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, the threat was greatly reduced after all. Ling Han laughed loudly, and used the Revere Life Sword to open the way, charging out. Although Su Xiu ran and the son of lightning attacked with all their might, suppressing the Revere Life Sword wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Ling Han didn't linger in battle either, and left with his people. Su Xiu ran and the others didn't know whether to chase after them or not. If they chased after them, what if Ling Han and the others turned back and attacked them? What would Dong Ling, and the small sword emperor do? If they didn't chase after them, they must have obtained the true dragon's tooth. How could they just watch them leave? But in the end, they still didn't chase after them. After a long while, the small sword emperor and Dong Shui recovered from the trembling of the dragon's might, and they both revealed expressions of fear. How could this aura be so terrifying? The situation has already exceeded the scope of our control. Immediately return to the middle state, and ask the sect's ultimate elites to attack and kill Ling Han, and take back the true dragon's tooth. That little boy is also very terrifying, actually able to emit an incredibly terrifying dragon's might. We can't let him go, either. Chapter 6:12. Xiu, she was like a bolt of lightning, fast beyond the limits of what the naked eye could capture. At least, it was extremely hard for spiritual infant tier cultivators to catch. Yang Yingshi had just crossed into the spiritual infant tier, and who would be wary of a 7 or 8-year-old little girl? She didn't put the slightest bit of attention on Hunyou. Her vision blurred, and Hunyou had already dashed in front of her. She cried out inwardly, and still wanted to bounce back, but Hunyou already threw a punch, smashing it on her chin. Peng, Yang Yingshi's entire person was sent flying, and the terrifying impact hit her, causing her to be knocked unconscious. Hunyou bounced, but caught up to her at an even faster speed. Riding on her shoulder, she pressed down on her head with both hands and twisted. Ka, the crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Losing the defense of origin power, a spiritual infant tier's physique was extremely fragile, and her head was forcibly plucked off by Hunyou. Yang Yingshi instantly woke up again. Her eyes opened, revealing a terrified expression, and her headless body flailed about. Spiritual infant tier cultivator's chi was very long, and she actually didn't die immediately after her head was plucked off. Moreover, if her head was reattached now, she could still recover. Hunyou landed, and with a casual wave, the head was thrown out by her. Yang Yingshi's body hurriedly ran over, blood continuously spurting from her severed neck. However, she only ran a dozen steps before crashing to the ground, and her limbs twitched a few more times before forever stopping. A dignified spiritual infant tier cultivator's head was easily plucked off by a little girl, and killed on the spot. The whole place was silent. Qin Lianyu, He Lan Yun, Chou Zifei, and the others, which one of them didn't know Hunyou? They even ate with her. But now, their legs were trembling, and they had the urge to faint. This little girl was too terrifying. Qin Lianyu recalled that yesterday, the little girl was still very displeased, asking if Ling Han could kill her. At the time, it naturally sounded like a joke, but now, the little girl was clearly serious. Unknowingly, she had actually circled around the gates of hell, causing her to immediately break out in a cold sweat. She couldn't help but feel an incomparable chill. Ah! Hu Qingfang and Yang Yingyun finally came back to their senses and hurriedly escaped into the carriage. Let's go, let's go. He urged the 4 beautiful women to drive the carriage away. You want to kill the cute Nyo, Nyo is angry. Hunyou broke into a run and chased after the carriage. Her body turned into lightning, and in a flash, she arrived above the carriage and threw a punch. Weng, a screen of light opened up, blocking her fist. After all, this was on the level of the spiritual infant tier, and the little girl was only in the high level of the flower blossom tier, so her fists could not break it. Only then did Hu Qingfang calm down a little, and he said sternly, "Ha ha ha, come. You'll have to cultivate for another 10 million years to kill this young master." Hunyou flew into a rage, and opened her small mouth to bite at the screen of light. Ka-cha, even this screen of light could not resist Hunyou's teeth, and instantly shattered. However, This was activated by the origin crystal, and the shattered light screen immediately began to repair itself, as if it was in a race with Hunyo's destruction. In a short period of time, the two sides seemed to be evenly matched. However, Hu Qingfang was scared out of his wits again, and hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up, hurry up." The four beautiful women hurriedly urged the carriage to speed into the sky. Xiao, the carriage quickly disappeared into the horizon. Qin Lianyu and the others still didn't move, dumbstruck. The impact they suffered was too great. After a while, with a flash of lightning, Hunyo had already returned. She pouted in displeasure, put her hands on her hips, and said, "Not fun, they ran away. You're already fierce enough, killing a spiritual infant tier elite in one strike and breaking open a spiritual infant tier's defense with a bite. If this was known, it could shock the whole world." At this time, everyone seemed to have been struck by an alarm, and they all moved towards Hunyo. This time, there was no longer the slightest bit of contempt in their eyes. This was a little demon king, enough to kill them. After a fight, I'm hungry. Hunyo stuck to Ling Han, and said fawningly, "Can Nyo eat another piece of meat?" "No, you've already eaten enough today." Ling Han shook his head, resolutely refusing. "Eat another small piece, just a small piece." Hunyo said coquettishly. No means no. Ling Han was very resolute. "Stingy, Nyo is going to turn bad." Hunyo pouted, getting angry. Everyone broke into a sweat for Ling Han. This little demon king forcibly snapped off a spiritual infant tier's head, and you actually dared to defy her. Aren't you afraid she'll flip out and twist your neck off to use it as a wine pot? However, what surprised everyone was that Hunyo actually didn't make a big fuss, and not long later, stuck to Ling Han again, begging bitterly, and when she finally got a piece of jerky, she was extremely happy. This was simply inconceivable. They were all tempted. So this little girl was a glutton, and could be bribed with food. If they could abduct this little girl, then she now had the strength to kill low-level spiritual infant tier warriors. How strong would she be when she grew to 10 or 20 years old? Extremely profitable. They hurriedly took out jerky to seduce Hunyo, thinking that Ling Han was truly an idiot. Such a strong hatchet man obviously had to be won over, and he actually couldn't bear to part with a few pieces of meat. Didn't you hear the old saying, "You can't trap a wolf if you don't give up your child"? She didn't want your child, just a few pieces of meat. However, how could they move Hunyo? They were all kicked back by the little girl. If it wasn't for her current murderous nature being somewhat restrained, she'd definitely slaughter all of them that dared to be so annoying. Qin Lianyu, however, focused her beautiful eyes on Ling Han. She recalled Yang Yingyun's inexplicable consecutive stumbles earlier, which was an inconceivable thing on an expert. Now, combined with Hunyo's freakishness, she had a bold conjecture. If it wasn't for Ling Han also possessing terrifying strength, he'd be able to restrain this savage little girl. "Ugly, you're staring at Nyo's Ling Han. Are you having some bad thoughts?" Hunyo suddenly appeared in front of Qin Lianyu, her small face full of vigilance. She really couldn't be careless. There would always be people who had ideas about her, Ling Han. Qin Lianyu didn't think much of it, thinking that the little girl didn't speak clearly and said Ling Han's name incorrectly. She smiled faintly, and said, Nyo, how is big sister ugly?" "Ugly everywhere." Hunyo said solemnly, pointing at Zhu Xian and said, "Not as good as that ugly. Tell me, where aren't you ugly?" Qin Lianyu couldn't help but smile. Her beauty surpassed Zhu Xian by who knew how many times, but she obviously wouldn't say it, and only said, Nyo, is your Lingyun powerful?" "Of course it's powerful as Nyo." Hunyo immediately said, her face full of pride. "Oh." Qin Lianyu's beautiful eyes lit up. She knew that Ling Han definitely wasn't as ordinary as he appeared. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 613. The party continued on their way. After this episode, obviously no one dared to make sarcastic remarks towards Ling Han. They weren't afraid of Ling Han, but of Hunyo. This little girl was too clingy to Ling Han, and whoever spoke ill of Ling Han would explode the little girl. This girl was a fiend, and didn't hold back when she killed. They were even more envious of Ling Han, actually hugging such a thick thigh. Each and every one of them was filled with dissatisfaction towards Ling Han. Why, just 2 days later, they were caught up again. It was still Hu Qingfang. Ling Han was really quite impressed. This guy was really not afraid of death. He had already escaped twice and still dared to come back. No, it should be said how perverted this guy was to be so obsessed with Qin Lianyu. Ha 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 ha, this young master is back again. It was still the same carriage, still controlled by the same 4 beautiful women, but the difference was that no obscene sounds came from the carriage this time. Should I clap? Ling Han said with a smile. Clapping means kowtowing, don't even think about living. Hu Qingfang's voice came. The carriage opened, and he and an old man walked out side by side. Ling Han turned pale with fright and said, I really didn't think that your Wind Moon sect is not only perverted, but also homosexual. I really can't bear to look straight at it. Dirty, truly too dirty. Nonsense. Hu Qingfang hurriedly jumped up. Their Wind Moon sect obviously didn't fear romance. On the contrary, they took pride in it, thinking that the lust of men and women was also a kind of natural law that could be spat out by men and women. Then when it's a lone man and a lone man, you two squeezing together, don't you have? Ling Han said deliberately. Junior, impudent. The old man immediately snorted, as if squeezed out of metal and stone, full of sharpness and killing power. Chou Zifei and the others immediately bled from their ears, eyes, and noses. Only Qin Lianyu was an exception, because her tier was higher. Of course, Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er, and Hunyo didn't either. Ling Han and Hunyo's battle prowess was strong enough, while Zhu Xian'er received Ling Han's protection. Extreme Explosion Killing King, Duan Mingde. Qin Lianyu immediately exclaimed. Kaka, little girl, I didn't expect you to recognize me. TSK, you're really not bad looking. If it weren't for young sect master having sex with you, even I would want to dual cultivate with you. The old man laughed strangely, his gaze towards Qin Lianyu filled with desire. Extreme Explosion Killing King, Duan Mingde, peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, Qin Lianyu said again. Everyone was in despair. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, this was too strong. Though Hunyo was very ferocious, she was only in the flower blossom tier, after all. Being able to kill Yang Yingshi was only because she had taken her opponent by surprise. Who would have thought that a little girl of 7 or 8 years old could explode with such speed? But now, Duan Mingde would definitely be on guard, and he was in the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, so his battle prowess was definitely not something that Yang Yingshi, who had just crossed into this tier, could compare to. It was over. This thought appeared in everyone's mind once again. Lord Duan, apart from those few women, kill everyone else. Hu Qingfang shouted. Yes, young sect master. Duan Mingde received the order, and his gaze turned towards everyone eerily as he mumbled, who should I kill first? They clearly knew that Duan Mingde was only toying with them, but a chill still rose up in Chou Zifei and the others' hearts, and they couldn't help but look towards others, not wishing to be the first to be slaughtered. Kaka, this old man is asking you guys, who should I kill first? Duan Mingde said sinisterly. He liked to play with people's hearts the most, making people fight amongst themselves, and then he would kill them, enjoying the other party's expression of despair and regret. Chou Zifei and the others looked at each other, and pointed towards Ling Han in unison, saying, It's him. Don't fall for his trick. He Lan Yun shouted. No matter what, he won't let us go, fight it out with him. Fight what, you won't die. Cho Zifei shouted. He Lan Yun was almost angered to death. How much better would her end be than death? Ling Han sighed, and said, "What's the saying? If you don't do it, you won't die." Originally, since we're in the same profession, I didn't mind saving you guys, but now, even if others don't kill me, I'll slaughter you guys. Such arrogance. Just a spiritual ocean tier warrior. Cho Zifei and the others all snorted coldly. They could only find a shred of confidence in front of Ling Han now. This brat only abducted a strange girl with super strong strength, and he really thought he was a spiritual infant tier elite. Ha 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 ha. Duan Mingde laughed loudly. He loved this kind of internal fight the most. Lord Duan, please attack quickly, Hu Qingfang urged. Duan Mingde looked at Ling Han, and said, "Since everyone decided to kill you first, this old man plans to follow everyone's opinion and kill you first. If you have that kind of strength, then bring it on," Ling Han said indifferently. Ha, such an arrogant youngster. Duan Mingde sneered, his gaze sweeping over Hu Niu. It's this girl who killed Yang Yunshi. When he heard the news, his first reaction was that it was absurd, and now that he saw it with his own eyes, this feeling was even stronger. Was it possible? Little girl, attack, let this old man see what skills you have, he provoked. Hu Niu snorted, and said, Ling Han will take care of you, Niu won't attack. Duan Mingde didn't have any strange reaction to this name. After all, this was the middle state, and perhaps the news of the divine treasure trove only spread among absolute elites, or among some geniuses of the younger generation. Ha, this brat is really that powerful. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, whether powerful or not, we'll know after we fight. Arrogant, very arrogant. This old man likes to kill people like you the most, exciting. Duan Mingde laughed loudly, and stretched out his right hand. Vein-like patterns shone, emitting a terrifying pressure. The peak stage of the spiritual infant tier was so powerful. Ling Han was unafraid, and said with a smile, are you trying to scare me? Not scare, this is real pressure, Duan Mingde said with a smile. Duan Mingde said with a smile. His right hand pressed towards the empty space where Ling Han was. Hong, endless origin power surged, turning into a vast ocean that pressed down towards Ling Han. Are you seeking death? Ling Han's figure flashed, and lightning overflowed. Xiao, he appeared in front of Duan Mingde, and punched out. So fast. Everyone was greatly shocked. What kind of speed was this, almost comparable to Hu Niu's? Although Duan Mingde didn't believe in Hu Niu's strength, he was still somewhat wary, but towards Ling Han, he really didn't have any. A mere spiritual ocean tier, it couldn't be more obvious, could he overturn the heavens? However, Ling Han's attack was as fast as lightning, giving him no time to defend at all. He only had time to tilt his face slightly, and pang, his cheek was still brushed by the wind from the fist, and instantly, blood seeped out. He hurriedly sprung backwards, but as he retreated, Ling Han advanced, following him like a shadow, always staying half a foot in front of him, making him tremble with fear. Damn it! Chapter 614. Duan Mingde retreated hurriedly, while Ling Han advanced hurriedly. The two stuck closely to each other, like a pair of lovey-dovey lovers. However, Duan Mingde didn't feel romantic, and only felt his scalp go numb. How could this youngster's speed be so fast, as if he was his shadow that couldn't be shaken off no matter what, making him shudder with fear. This wasn't some spiritual ocean tier, but a flower blossom tier expert, and a high-level one at that, one that was close to the peak. However, the problem was, even a peak stage flower blossom tier cultivator shouldn't be so fierce. He was a peak stage spiritual infant tier cultivator, and could kill any flower blossom tier cultivator several hundred times with a single finger, so how could he be forced to retreat repeatedly? Ling Han wasn't just a matter of getting close. As his fists moved, he launched a series of violent attacks. Peng, 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 one punch after another was like a raging wave, forcing Duan Mingde to not only defend while retreating, but also constantly tilt his head to avoid being hit by Ling Han. One retreated, one advanced, and in an instant, over 100 moves had passed. Everyone was dumbfounded. It turned out that Ling Han was also a fierce person. Earlier, Hunyo killed a low-level spiritual infant tier cultivator with a single punch, and although Ling Han's battle record wasn't so dazzling, his opponent was a peak-stage spiritual infant tier cultivator. Now that Ling Han attacked, everyone could obviously feel his high-level flower blossom tier aura, and they had the same thoughts as Duan Mingde. High-level flower blossom tier cultivators shouldn't be so fierce. Considering that Hunyo had shown extraordinary splendor before, they finally had an idea in their hearts. This was the so-called freak, able to surpass tiers to battle, and surpass a whole major tier at that. Truly fuck you terrifying. Only Qin Lian Yu had guessed it before, so her degree of shock wasn't as great as the others, but she still widened her beautiful eyes. In comparison, did a genius like her still have the face to hang the word genius? No, she was still a genius, but Hunyo and Ling Han had already surpassed the level of geniuses and entered the level of freaks. Ah! Duan Mingde roared. Hung, purple mist rose from his body, surrounding Ling Han. For a moment, Ling Han didn't know what was going on. Naturally, he didn't dare to be surrounded by this dense fog. His figure moved, and with a flash of lightning, he appeared more than 100 feet away, coldly staring at the other party. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier is nothing more than this, he said calmly. The thunderclap ninth heaven combined with the demon fairy step allowed his speed to reach the level of the deity transformation tier, and was even more agile. Duan Mingde was so angry that he cried out loudly. He stretched out his hand and wiped his face. Seeing that his hand was full of blood, he could not help but become even more furious. Just now, he had been bombarded by Ling Han continuously. Though none of his blows had landed solidly, the wind from the fists had still managed to cut his face. My handsome face, he cried in exasperation. Ling Han was amused, and said, could it be that you still want to use this old face to pick up girls? TSK, then I really admire you a bit. What kind of aunties would be attracted by your old face? You could still do it, are you sending warmth to the aunties? Impudent junior, I will suppress and kill you. Duan Mingde charged out again. This time, he drew out a brocade. It looked like a silk handkerchief, but was much larger. On it were embroidered patterns of men and women having fun. As it fluttered in the wind, it was as if the people on it had come alive and were in the midst of a fierce battle. This wasn't an illusion, there were even decadent sounds that could make one's heart flustered. Spirit Tool. However, Wind Moon Sect's Spirit Tool was also extremely obscene and evil, actually using erotic pictures to disturb one's willpower. Kill! Duan Mingde roared fiercely. Xiao, xiao, xiao. From within the brocade, there were also rays of grand light that shot towards Ling Han, and Duan Mingde himself also pounced, a terrifying aura spreading as the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier's strength was fully displayed. Ling Han laughed loudly. If the opponent was Small Saber King, then he definitely couldn't rival him. After all, he could surpass tiers to battle, and so could Small Saber King. At most, he could surpass more tiers, but he definitely couldn't make up for the gap of a major tier. However, Duan Mingde was different. Although he was at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, his battle prowess was only around 10 stars, so he was completely unafraid. Unleashing the thunderclap ninth heaven, he turned into a flash of lightning and appeared in front of Duan Mingde, throwing 2 fists again. Brat, you dare! Duan Mingde waved purple mist, once again enveloping Ling Han. This was the Wind Moon Sect's secret art. For outsiders, this could confuse the opponent's mind, causing them to become lustful and lose all rationality. However, for Wind Moon Sect's people, this was a tonic that could excite their spirits and clear their minds. Ling Han sealed all the pores on his body with origin power, and this time, he no longer retreated, but attacked head-on. Peng, 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 the two battled fiercely. That brocade-like spirit tool was very powerful, continuously shooting light beams and launching attacks at Ling Han. This also reached the level of a high-level spiritual infant tier, and couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han had to dodge. His true tier was only at the flower blossom tier. With the help of this spirit tool, Duan Mingde finally managed to fight to a draw with Ling Han. Everyone was shocked. One had to know that Ling Han was currently unarmed, and if he also drew out his spirit tool, wouldn't he immediately be able to gain the upper hand? This was too terrifying. How could there be such a kick-ass flower blossom tier warrior? Chou Zifei and the other four men's faces were pale. If Wind Moon Sect won this battle, then they were definitely finished. However, if Ling Han won, would he let them go since they forced Ling Han to die earlier? Dying left and right, so what was the point of staying? They all retreated, wanting to slip away. As for that Heaven-Mending Academy, they'd go next year. Heng, where do you guys want to go? Hunyo put her hands on her hips, glaring fiercely. Kenyi raised his long saber horizontally, overflowing with killing intent. If it was only Kenyi, then the five of them could break in together, but with Hunyo, they could only die. Chou Zifei laughed dryly, and said, Kenyi, what do you mean? Since they'd already fallen out, Kenyi simply laid his cards on the table, and said, before young Master Han decides, no one is allowed to leave, young Master Han. Ling Yun, Chou Zifei and the others finally knew that Ling Yun wasn't that person's real name, but they were also very unfamiliar with the name young Master Han. Could this person be called Ling Han or Han Yun? They didn't seem to have heard of it. Kenyi, are you being ungrateful? Chou Zifei immediately roared. We accepted you into this circle, and this is your repayment to us. Truly a despicable person. Xing Jiansun also reprimanded. Kenyi sneered, and said, then what do I have to do to not be a despicable person? Let us go. Yu Yuanming said hurriedly. He believed that Kenyi should be able to persuade Hunyo. A group of cowards, I'm ashamed to be associated with you guys. Kenyi said coldly, his killing intent even more blazing. Kenyi, we're all considered friends, forget it. He Lan Yun stood out to mediate. She was considering the overall situation. After all, the six of them came from the same place, and everyone's backers were inextricably linked. That's right, that's right. Chou Zifei nodded, and suddenly made a move, grabbing He Lan Yun and pressing the blade against her neck. Let us go immediately, or else this woman will die here. Chapter 615. A palm strike from a shattering void tier elite was only equivalent to a somersault. Everyone's expression changed. Did this guy have the life of an unkillable cockroach? A shattering void tier elite's attack was actually completely unscathed. Oh, there was indeed some dust on his body, but that was all. Not to mention Ling Han, even if it was a shattering void tier elite, they would probably be heavily injured, or even killed in an instant under such an attack. No, this had to be fake. Su Xiu Ran's eyes popped out, and his mouth opened wide, even spitting out his tongue. Don't blame this prodigy for losing his composure, and it was precisely because he was a prodigy of the present age that he deeply knew how difficult it was to cultivate physique to the level of 10th tier rare metal. The sea race was powerful enough, wasn't it? Every single one of them had ancestral blood, especially the royal family. Relying on true dragon bloodline, not only did the possibility of advancing into the shattering void tier greatly increase, they were also all-body cultivators, and their physiques were tough. In a battle of the same tier, they could be said to have the upper hand. However, very few kings of the sea race could reach the level of 10th tier rare metal in terms of physique. This step was too difficult. Not only did it require true dragon bloodline, it also had to be extremely pure. For example, in the Four Seas, only the common ruler, the Ao family, had 2 or 3 people who cultivated physique to this level. Additionally, that alternative dragon in the ghostly dragon cave was also different. Its ancestral blood was pure, and it had once stepped into this level. The reason why that alternative dragon couldn't be killed even by immortals descending to the lower realm was simple, it was because its physique was 10th tier rare metal, and was too difficult to kill. This kind of physique could only be slowly refined like 10th tier rare metal after being captured, but that alternative dragon possessed battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier in the first place, so how could it possibly be slowly refined? However, Ling Han was presently only in the deity transformation tier, yet his physique had charged up to the level of 10th tier rare metal. How could people not lose their composure at this? Su Xiu Ran sighed internally. His defeat to Ling Han was really not the slightest bit undeserved. If Ling Han could be killed by him, that 10th tier rare metal's physique would really be too worthless. The Beast Snake King had lived for so long, and was also one of the strongest elites of the present age. Naturally, he would not blink even if the sky collapsed before his eyes. He looked coldly at Ling Han, and said, "I really never thought that your physique had actually reached such a level, old beast snake, do you still want to kill me?" After Ling Han brushed off the dirt on his body, he once again flew back into the skies. In truth, a strong physique was only one of the special characteristics of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, but the more powerful aspect was its recovery ability. The severed limbs of the body of Diamond would automatically regrow, and there was no need to circulate the indestructible Heaven Scroll at all. How terrifying was that? He naturally would not tell the other party about this. The Beast Snake King smirked coldly, and said, "You are just a little stronger in physique. It's fine even if I cannot kill you for the time being. I can capture you and bring you back to be slowly refined. 1 year, 10 years, I will definitely be able to refine you. What I lack the least is patience and time. Can you capture me?" Ling Han stretched out a finger and pointed. The Beast Snake King was instantly displeased. What kind of existence was he? When had he ever been pointed at by someone before? He immediately wanted to make a move, but he had just raised his hand when he suddenly paused, and said, "Honored one, please show yourself." "What if I don't want to see you?" Yi Shuang's lazy voice was heard. "Then it's best if you don't interfere, honored one. This is the will of the 5 great sects." The Beast Snake King humphed. "Little earthworms, I don't know how many I have trampled to death in the past, and you actually dare to be insolent in front of me." Yi Shuang said proudly. She still did not show herself. "For the sake of that large earthworm, I don't want to become enemies with him. Get lost, lest you say that I bullied a junior in the future." "Honored one, aren't you a bit too arrogant?" the Beast Snake King said with a sneer. He was the strongest elite in the world, with battle prowess as high as 12 stars of shattering void tier. Those that could rival him in this world could really be counted on one's fingers. Not to mention those freaks from the Purple Moon Empire, each of them had grasped 4 or 5 mystical powers, and could even use power of the nation, and their battle prowess had even surpassed 15 stars. "Are you going to get lost or not?" Yi Shuang directly rebuked. The Beast Snake King took a deep breath. Obviously, she was a shattering void tier elite. There was no doubt about this, but how many stars of shattering void tier battle prowess did she have? At this moment, he was having a hard time fighting against the Purple Moon Empire, and if there was another shattering void tier enemy, that would be an additional burden. It was best not to add any more enemies for himself, unless he had the confidence to kill her here. However, they were both in the shattering void tier, and if one side wanted to escape, there was still a considerable amount of certainty. At worst, they would just burn their life force, and the speed that they would explode with would be something that even the immortals in the lower realm could not possibly catch up to. "All right, I will only bring this junior with me," he said, pointing at Ling Han. "No." Yi Shuang flatly refused. Your Honor, you are too domineering, the Beast Snake King said coldly. Did she really think he was afraid? Yi Shuang laughed loudly, and said, I have always been domineering. Are you displeasing to the eye? If you have the ability, then come and fight me. How will I deal with you? The Beast Snake King trembled in anger. This woman was too much of a ruffian. He no longer paid attention to her, and instead stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. Since he could not slap this freak to death, then he would capture him and bring him back to be suppressed. Such a physique could completely be used as a human pill, and after being refined, it would definitely be a great tonic. Impudence. A slender hand shot out, endlessly enlarging, and blocked the large hand that the Beast Snake King had stretched out. Peng, the two collided, and instantly formed a visible wave in the skies, which suddenly swept downwards. Weng, a hemispherical light barrier immediately appeared on the imperial capital below. Under this wave, it trembled as if it was about to be destroyed. Pa, a few places split open, and the shock wave instantly caused great destruction. Fortunately, because of the existence of this light barrier, the imperial capital only suffered the impact. Otherwise, it would have been razed to the ground. The shattering void tear was too strong. In the skies, a light barrier also appeared on that battleship. The hull of the battleship swayed as if it was in water, and was affected by the waves. Yi Shuang, don't fight with him here. My imperial capital is about to be destroyed. Ling Han called out. That defensive light barrier just now was actually formed by the silhouette of the black tower above the imperial capital. This was the marvelous use of power of the nation. If he could unify the whole north region, the defense that was formed probably even the Beast Snake King wouldn't be able to break through. Yi Shuang's figure flashed, and she was already stepping into the skies. She waved her long hair in great dissatisfaction, and said, Brat, you've grown more daring, actually daring to order me around. Grandaunt, please suppress this old snake. That should be fine, right? Ling Han said with a smile. Although it's not too sincere, I have such a helpful personality. It can't be helped, so I'll help you this once. Yi Shuang turned to the Beast Snake King, and revealed a bright smile. Little earthworm, if you don't leave now, there really won't be another chance. Who are you? The Beast Snake King looked at Yi Shuang solemnly. He actually couldn't tell the depth of her cultivation, which meant that her tier was not beneath his. It was definitely impossible to surpass him. In this world, at most, one could only be in the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, unless it was an immortal that descended to the mortal realm. Chapter 616. There was a first and a second time for everything, but how could there be a third time? Hu Qingfang already escaped twice, and actually wanted to run a third time, inviting another deity transformation tier elite over. Ling Han obviously couldn't bear it, and blocked the carriage with his sword, imposing. Handsome. Qin Lianyu said infatuatedly. She was actually a romantic person, obviously worshipping heroes the most. Ling Han was similar in age to her, and the difference in tier wasn't great, but his strength was much stronger, instantly conquering her heart. Of course, she only worshipped Ling Han now, which was different from falling in love with him. The ugly freak is planning on Ling Han as expected, should I kill her? Hu Niu stroked her chin, seriously considering this idea. Ling Han condensed sword chi, forming a fake ray, and 10,000 techniques returned to one was ready to be unleashed after accumulating power. Brat, you're indeed very strong, but this young master is the Wind Moon sect's young sect master, are you sure you want to be enemies with me? Hu Qingfang threatened. Being forced to use his background to scare people, it could be seen that he was indeed at his wit's end. Ling Han sneered, and said, Wind Moon sect, such a shameless sect, I might as well uproot it to prevent it from wreaking havoc. Such big words. Hu Qingfang shouted fiercely. Although Ling Han's battle prowess was strong, he was only at the level of the spiritual infant tier, while the Wind Moon sect had heaven tier warriors overseeing it, and more than one. Deity transformation tier warriors could crush spiritual infant tier warriors, let alone heaven tier ones. I'll kill you first as a sacrifice to the flag. Ling Han had already finished accumulating power, and with a swing of his sword, 29 flashes of sword chi condensed together, turning into a faint golden stripe that swept towards the carriage. The carriage already activated its shield, blocking the stripe, but this was only a matter of an instant. Peng, the shield actually shattered under the bombardment of sword chi, and the stripe continued to sweep past, passing through the middle of the carriage. The entire carriage was instantly split into two, forcibly sliced into two. Terrifying. When the carriage's defenses were activated, it could form a spiritual infant tier level shield, and it relied on origin crystals as a source of power. As long as the origin crystals were still present, the shield could be maintained, and could be instantly replenished. However, it was still destroyed by a single sword strike. Then, how terrifying was the instantaneous explosive power of Ling Han's sword strike, for it to be unable to replenish the shield in time. In the carriage, Hu Qingfang leapt out, his face pale. This guy was really too ferocious. He was sitting in the Wind Moon sect's ancient chariot, which theoretically couldn't be broken by any spiritual infant tier warrior. In the Central Plains, those in the divine transformation realm could be called experts, and those who had reached this level would not easily start a war with the Wind Moon sect. Therefore, Hu Qingfang had always been arrogant with the ancient chariot. Until recently, he had kicked 2 iron plates in succession. Hun Yo could bite through the chariot's defenses, and Ling Han was even more awesome, slicing the chariot in two with a single slash. You don't come over. Hu Qingfang lost his greatest trump card, and finally panicked, completely losing his composure. Then scream until your throat breaks, and see if anyone will come to save you, Ling Han said indifferently. Ha ha ha. Hun Yo gave face and laughed, while Zhu Xian covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Qin Lianyu thought for a moment, and also laughed. When an idol told a joke, no matter if it was funny or not, she'd laugh first. Attack! Hu Qingfang's words pushed the 4 beautiful women forward, while he himself turned around and ran. Truly unworthy of being a man. Ling Han's figure flashed, turning into a bolt of lightning and catching up to Hu Qingfang. With a slash, pu, the opponent's head flew into the sky, blood spurting wildly from the severed neck. Young sect master! The 4 beautiful women exclaimed, their faces pale. Jackals of the same tribe. Ling Han turned around and swung his sword again, beheading these 4 beautiful women as well. 4 Wind Moon sect's people, men harvested primordial yin, and women harvested primordial yang. The higher the tier, the more people they harmed, and none of them had to be tolerated. Ah, you really did it. Qin Lianyu looked at Hu Qingfang's corpse and sighed. Although Wind Moon sect's sect master has countless wives and concubines, he only has this one son, and is extremely doted on. You killing him is forming a mortal enmity with Wind Moon sect. Ling Han walked towards her, and said, then should I silence you? No need, no need. Qin Lianyu hurriedly waved her hand. Isn't there still Yang Yingyun, this fish that escaped the net? No need to silence me. This woman had quite the spirit of self-entertainment. Ling Han shook his head, and walked over to collect the spatial rings that Hu Qingfang and Duan Mingde dropped. Firstly, these 2 were truly quite wealthy, especially Hu Qingfang, who actually had a piece of 7th-tier rare metal in his spatial ring. Presumably, it was to be forged into a weapon for him after he advanced into the spiritual infant tier. Perfect, I only have 6 arrows left. Although this piece of rare metal isn't big, forging 5 arrows shouldn't be a problem. Ling Han walked back, and said, where are you 2 going? These two obviously referred to Qin Lianyu and He Lanyun. You guys are going to the Restore Heaven Academy, and I'm also going there, so of course we're going together. Qin Lianyu immediately said. He Lanyun glanced at Kenyi, and said, I'll also go with you guys. Kenyi blushed slightly, but a hint of gentleness flashed past his eyes. The calamity just now instead opened the membrane separating the two of them, playing a positive role. Ling Han laughed loudly, and casually took out a large handful of medicinal pills from the Black Tower, handing them over to He Lanyun, and said, Come, 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 this is a greeting gift. He Lanyun instantly blushed in embarrassment, but still extended her hand and took back these medicinal pills. She then secretly kissed Kenyi for another night. Her heart was sweet, and she felt that all the humiliation she suffered before had turned into smoke. Qin Lianyu also extended her slender hand, and said, Do I? This woman was so thick-skinned. Ling Han sneered, and said, No, stingy. Qin Lianyu muttered. Ling Han ignored her, and said, Let's go. Don't really attract the Wind Moon Sex Ultimate Expert, then we'll have to bear the consequences. Everyone nodded. This was a forest anyways, and wild beasts ran amok, so they could obviously destroy the corpses and erase the evidence for them. Without Hu Qingfang's threat, they walked back to the main road. After all, the terrain in the forest was complicated, affecting speed. Brother Ling, are you interested in going to a place? Qin Lianyu approached to strike up a conversation. No. Ling Han directly refused. You still haven't heard me say what place it is. Qin Lianyu was a bit resentful, doubting her own charm for the first time. How could Ling Han refuse so straightforwardly? I'm not interested in any place, Ling Han said. That's a medicinal valley. Qin Lianyu said. Ling Han was slightly startled. For him, the Alchemy Emperor, a medicinal valley was still quite attractive. In his hands, he could maximize the effects of medicinal ingredients. His current tier was getting higher and higher, and he needed more and more high-level medicinal ingredients. He asked, What level of medicinal valley? Chapter 617. If it was only a flower blossom tier or spiritual pedestal tier medicinal valley, Ling Han wouldn't be interested. He'd soon cross the flower blossom tier and advance into the spiritual infant tier. I'm not sure about the specifics. There's a spiritual infant tier beast keeping watch at the valley entrance, so I don't dare to go deep, but I also found a spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, Qin Lianyu said. It's also because of this medicinal valley that I ran into Hu Qingfang. I see. Ling Han murmured. There was a 7th-tier spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, so there might be even higher-level spirit medicines in the valley. Even if they were only 7th-tier spirit medicines, they were still quite useful. Brother Ling, are you moved? Qin Lianyu said with a smile. Are you showing off? Ling Han said. Follow me. Qin Lianyu didn't take the chance to push him, but instead led the way in front while talking about how she discovered the medicinal valley. Because there was still half a year before the Restore Heaven Academy officially opened, she wasn't in a hurry and wandered around along the way, still wanting to find her own chance. And she was really lucky. When she was tracking a big white rabbit, she came to that medicinal valley. However, there were spiritual infant tier beasts roaming about, frightening her. She was just about to find someone to join forces and barge in, but unexpectedly encountered Hu Qingfang. She was then chased by the latter, and tangled with him for more than half a month. So, they were still quite far from that medicinal valley. When Qin Lianyu ran, she obviously took many detours, but they didn't have to go to the medicinal valley. They only needed to walk in a straight line, so it was about a 5-day journey. A day later, they came to a small town and stopped to rest for the night. Lady Qin. Lady Qin. Early the next morning, they were about to set off when they saw a young man chasing after them. He looked to be about 26 or 27, and was actually already at the peak stage of the flower blossom tier, quite impressive in strength. His looks were also quite impressive. A cyan outfit completely outlined his slender and fit figure, his hair was jet black as if it could glow, and his skin was sparkling, smoother than many women's. Yi Rong. Qin Lianyu revealed a surprised expression, and said, "Why did you come?" "I heard that Miss Qin was entangled by that evil thief, Hu Qingfang, so I immediately rushed over. Fortunately, I came in time." The azure-clothed man heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. There was an obvious adoration in his eyes. Qin Lianyu pretended not to see and said, "This is the Flying Star sect master's beloved disciple, Yi Rong, Brother Yi. Brother Ye's talent in martial art is extremely high, and he obtained the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy." Yi Rong immediately revealed an arrogant expression. He placed his hands behind his back, appearing extremely arrogant. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, it showed that his talent was indeed extremely awesome. Such a genius was obviously proud of his talent. He was polite to Qin Lianyu because he liked this woman, and in front of others, he naturally revealed the arrogance that geniuses normally had. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. A genius like him naturally disdained to be associated with Ling Han and the others. Ling Han only smiled, and said, "So it's Brother Yi." Seeing Ling Han greet him, Ken Yi, Zhu Xian and He Lan Yun also greeted him one after another. Hun Yo, however, didn't bother to pay attention to such a cocky guy. Yi Rong took everyone's greetings as a matter of course. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, this already sufficiently affirmed his talent, and was the capital for his pride. He was completely condescending, and only looked at Qin Lianyu, and said, "Miss Qin, let me escort you to the Restore Heaven Academy." Qin Lianyu was displeased, and said, "Brother Yi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Hee, I'm just concerned about you." Yi Rong didn't take offense. However, if these words were said by someone else, he'd definitely fly into a rage, and it was even possible that he'd directly kill the other party. How could a peerless genius be insulted lightly? Qin Lianyu looked at Ling Han with an inquiring gaze, because they were going to the Medicinal Valley next. If there was one more person, then there would obviously be one more person to distribute the treasured medicine after obtaining it. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Since Brother Yi is so sincere, then let's go together." Yi Rong couldn't help but glance at Ling Han, and felt that this person was a bit perceptive, knowing that he was pursuing Qin Lianyu, and deliberately spoke for him. And there was no harm in guiding him in the future. He opened his mouth very arrogantly, and said, "You guys are all going to the Restore Heaven Academy, right?" After obtaining everyone's affirmation, he laughed mischievously, and said, "I'm a direct disciple, after all, and have certain privileges. In the future, when you guys go to the academy to participate in the exam, I'll put in a few good words for you guys and help you guys." Hee, then many thanks, Ling Han said indifferently. He'd seen many people who thought themselves infallible like this, and didn't take it to heart at all. Zhu Xian, Qin Lianyu, and the other 2 girls covered their mouths and laughed lightly. If this guy witnessed Ling Han's battle prowess, he probably wouldn't say anything about helping even if he was beaten to death. Blushing, including Yi Rong, the 7 of them continued forward. Yi Rong certainly had quite a background. Flying Star sect was a super sect that wasn't inferior to Wind Moon sect, but couldn't compare to ancient orthodoxies like Absolute Saber sect and Heaven's Sword sect. This Yi Rong was the 7th disciple of Flying Star sect's sect master, and also one of the most outstanding 3. Being able to obtain the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy was proof. He was currently only 29 years old, and looked 26 or 27 because he entered the Flower Blossom tier early, and his appearance changed slowly. Peak stage of the Flower Blossom tier, battle prowess of 16 stars, extremely outstanding. Along the way, only he had the right to talk, boasting about his battle achievements, what kind of elites and geniuses he'd once beheaded, insufferably arrogant. However, everyone paid no attention to him, making him often unable to continue the conversation as he spoke, appearing extremely awkward. For days later, at night, they passed by a village. Because it wasn't far from the medicinal valley, they wanted to rush there in one go, not thinking of stopping here. However, Ling Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Zhu Xian'er asked. Yi Rong was extremely displeased. If it weren't for Qin Lianyu's sake, he wouldn't drag these people along at all, but now, Ling Han actually dared to drag them down. "It's only just entered night, why isn't there a bit of fire in this village?" Ling Han asked. "Maybe they sleep early," Yi Rong said casually, appearing very displeased. A mere mortal village, even if something happened, how would it be worth paying attention? The typical mentality of a superior. Ling Han ignored him and turned back towards the village. Yi Rong trembled in anger. He actually dared to ignore him, truly despicable, he said, "Ignore him, we." Before the word, "go," left his mouth, he saw the others already follow Ling Han, almost making him faint from anger. Were these people possessed? Chapter 618. Ling Han entered the village. This was like a graveyard, deathly silent, and no movement could be heard. "Too quiet," Qin Lianyu said, continuously looking at the place where moonlight couldn't reach, as if a monster would suddenly jump out from the dark and ghastly place. "No breathing, no heartbeat," Zhu Xian'er said solemnly. For experts like them, they could hear the sound of heartbeat and breathing from a distance of 300 meters, and separated by a few walls. This wasn't a problem at all. But now, there were none of these sounds, not even the barking of domestic dogs and the crying of chickens and ducks. It was as if this village had been abandoned for countless years, but one could still clearly see corn cobs and red peppers hanging under the eaves of some houses, representing that this village still had people living not long ago, or even yesterday. Strange. Everyone discovered something was off, and said one after another. Yi Rong also walked over, and couldn't help but sneer, and said, "Just a mortal village, what's there to make a fuss about?" No one paid attention to him, and on the contrary, everyone's curiosity was piqued. Ling Han pushed open a door and walked in. The furniture in the house was all there, and there were even a few dishes on the table, but they were obviously cold now, but with a sniff, they hadn't gone bad yet. Something suddenly happened that caused the entire village's people to die, as well as domestic animals. After searching the house, Ling Han came to another house, but it was much more chaotic here. There were obvious signs of fighting, and there was fresh blood on the ground and walls, a ghastly sight. A conflict occurred, but the scale wasn't large. It should only be a dispute among mortals, Qin Lianyu speculated. But what exactly happened to actually affect the entire village, and even the livestock? This was puzzling. Even if two people fought, it couldn't possibly affect the entire village, not to mention that even the chickens and dogs suffered. Ling Han walked into the inner room, and suddenly, his steps paused. Hong, a black shadow suddenly scuttled out, pouncing towards Ling Han. Its arms spread open, looking like it was going to hug him, but its mouth was wide open, revealing ghastly white teeth as it pointed straight at Ling Han's throat. A mere mortal dares to launch a sneak attack," Yi Rong said disdainfully. He flicked a finger with his right hand, and that figure instantly fell backwards, a bit of blood appearing on his forehead. Ling Han was astonished. With a wave of his right hand, his origin energy transformed into flames that lit up the surrounding space. He could see that it was indeed a villager. There was a bloody hole in his forehead, but there was no blood splattering everywhere. It was just a bloody hole with a little bit of black blood flowing out. "What's so good about it?" Yi Rong said unhappily. They were about to reach the medicinal valley, so why were they wasting time here? This is a corpse soldier. Ling Han frowned. This person had been dead for a long time, so his blood had congealed. If a corpse soldier was not tempered, then it would only be left with the most primitive instincts. They slaughtered and devoured the flesh and blood of living creatures. It was clear that all the poultry in the village had been eaten by the villagers who had turned into corpse soldiers. Most of them had probably entered the forest to continue searching for blood and flesh. However, this one was lying in ambush in the house. It was a corpse when it was not alarmed, but after smelling the scent of living things, it moved. The mystery was solved, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The unknown was the most terrifying, and now that they knew what they were about to face, they were instead relieved. Strange, why are there corpse soldiers here? Could it be the Thousand Corpse Sect's doing? Ling Han mumbled. Previously, the Thousand Corpse Sect was quite high profile, besieging Million Treasures City with the fourth killing formation. If it weren't for Feng Peyun's appearance, Million Treasures City would probably have fallen into the hands of the Thousand Corpse Sect. He had a feeling that the Thousand Corpse Sect, which had always been low-key, might rise completely in this era. It was at once the best of times and the worst of times. It's just a low-level corpse soldier. Yi Rong actually recognized the corpse soldier, so he wasn't just arrogant. Ling Han searched the entire village again. There were a total of 5 corpse soldiers here, and what shocked him was that 2 corpse soldiers were obviously much stronger, probably devouring the other corpse soldiers and obtaining an upgrade. At the Fallen Moon Gorge, Ling Han stopped a plot of the Thousand Corpse Sect. They wanted to use medicinal pills to turn all the people in the desolate north into corpse soldiers, devouring each other and raising a corpse king. Could it be that the Thousand Corpse Sect was now daring enough to act so recklessly in the Middle State? In terms of population, the Middle State was enough to raise many corpse kings, but the problem was that the Middle State still had super forces like the Absolute Saber Sect and the Heaven's Sword Sect, so could they let the Thousand Corpse Sect act so recklessly? This world was destined to not be peaceful. Ling Han and the others continued on their way, and when they passed by a few small villages, they discovered that the people there were all turned into corpse soldiers. Such a situation not only shocked Ling Han, but even Qin Lianyu and Yi Rong became solemn. What did the Thousand Corpse Sect mean by this? They didn't find the people of the Thousand Corpse Sect, because they were already deep into the mountain forest. Under Qin Lianyu's guidance, they soon arrived at a valley that was extremely remote. The entrance was blocked by a towering tree, and if one didn't deliberately climb up, it was absolutely impossible to discover it. After the entrance, there was a long valley path that was very tight and narrow, but after walking forward for a few dozen meters, the path began to widen, becoming wider and wider. Above their heads, there were layers of protruding rocks blocking them. Even if one flew from the air, they would only think that this was a solid mountainous region, so how could they know that there was actually another world below? Light fell through a wondrous refraction, and although it wasn't very bright, it was enough for people to see. After walking for a while, the appearance of the valley finally appeared ahead. As expected, there was a 7th-tier spirit fruit at the entrance of the valley. It was a peach tree that bore bright red fruits, each as big as the mouth of a bowl, and an alluring fragrance could be smelled from far away. Chapter 619. Ling Han waited at the door. So many years had passed anyway, so he didn't mind waiting a little longer. Hun Yo, meanwhile, kicked a rock out of boredom. Pa, pa, pa. She seemed to be a bit addicted to it, kicking harder and harder with each kick. Finally, she'd gotten into trouble. Aya, who is it, actually daring to ambush this young master? A youngster walked over while holding his forehead, grimacing in pain. His features were all twisted in pain. When Hun Yo saw him, she instantly stuck out her tongue and hid behind Ling Han. Then, she stretched out a small finger and pointed at Zhu Xian Air, saying, "It's this woman who threw a rock at you, Niu saw it clearly. Who would suspect a child? That youngster followed Hu Niu's finger to Zhu Xian'er. He was just about to fly into a rage, but immediately revealed a stunned expression. This woman was really too beautiful, wasn't she? Her beauty was practically unparalleled in absolute Cold City. All of a sudden, it seemed as if his forehead didn't hurt anymore. He hurriedly put on what he thought was his most elegant smile, and said, I am Feng Yishou, may I know Mrs.'s name? Zhu Xian'er only glanced at him indifferently, and said, we've met by chance, and are only passers-by. There's no need to tell me your name. You have character, I like it. Feng Yishou turned his face away and said to himself. Then, he turned back, and his smile became even more brilliant. To be able to meet in the vast sea of people, isn't this a kind of fate? Miss, your beauty is too dazzling, my eyes can only feel your existence. Zhu Xian'er directly ignored him, lest he took advantage of the situation and pestered her endlessly. Miss, your beauty is poison, but I will gladly endure it. I've been conquered by you, please allow me to use the rest of my life to love you dearly. Feng Yishou blurted out words of love one after another. He was definitely a veteran in the brothel, and did not repeat even half a sentence. With his handsome appearance and his sweet mouth, it was believed that there would be countless women who would willingly jump into his gentle trap. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest effect on Zhu Xian'er, and instead caused her expression to become colder and colder. Idiot, why do you have so much nonsense to say? Just knock her out and carry her home. Hu Niu really could not go on anymore, and jumped out to give advice. That's not too good, right? Feng Yishou scratched his head as he grinned foolishly. Trust Niu. Hu Niu said encouragingly. Feng Yishou clapped his hands, and said, let's do it. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, what do you want to do? Feng Yishou instantly shuddered, and said, I have no interest in men, so don't play dirty jokes with me. Fuck, was this guy a clown? Ling Han laughed coldly, and said, since you've said so, then I have no choice but to play with you. Don't you dare act recklessly, I am not that kind of person. Furthermore, I am very powerful, so don't seek trouble for yourself. Feng Yishou hurriedly drew his sword, and put on a vigilant expression that said, you're a pervert, don't come near me. Ling Han moved, and grabbed out at the other, very casually. Damn pervert, move. Feng Yishou drew his sword, and Xiu, a sword ray slashed out, slicing towards Ling Han's wrist. Although this person was inexplicably unreliable, he really did have some skill. There were not many people who could condense sword ray at this age. However, compared to Ling Han, the two of them were completely not on the same level. Ling Han's hand twisted, and had already grabbed the other's wrist. He smiled, and said, guess, will I steam you or braise you? Mother. Feng Yishou's whole body was covered with goosebumps, and he hurriedly exerted his strength to struggle free, but Ling Han's hand was like an iron hoop, so he could not move at all, and could only stare at him helplessly. Don't call me mother, call me big brother, and I will let you go, Ling Han said, smiling. You think you are worthy of this young master calling you big brother? Feng Yishou humphed, and with a shake of his left hand, there actually appeared another sword, which he pierced towards Ling Han. Ling Han released his hand, and then grabbed out at Feng Yishou's left hand. Pa! He caught it head-on. Feng Yishou paled in shock. How could this person's attack be so fast? He roared in fury, and his right hand slashed out again. This time, he used his full power. Even his hair stood on end like needles, and his sword intent turned solid, charging towards Ling Han ruthlessly. The latter's physique was extremely strong, so his spirit would definitely not be stable enough. If he was hit by his attack, he would definitely hold his head and groan. How could there be such a monster in this world who had cultivated both his physique and spirit to the pinnacle? Ling Han smiled faintly, and with a move of his sword heart, Pa, Feng Yishou's sword intent instantly shattered, and as if he had suffered a heavy blow, Feng Yishou's face instantly turned pale, and even his expression was distorted, appearing to be in incredible pain. He released his hand, and Feng Yishou curled up on the ground, his whole body spasming. This attack on his spirit was not light. However, for him, this was no less than a kind of tempering. If he could endure it, the toughness of his spirit would definitely be able to advance another step further. Young Master Feng. At this moment, two people walked out from the door. One was the guard who had gone in to make the report previously, and the other was a slender old man. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s, and had quite a bearing, but at this moment, his face was filled with agitation. With a quick stride, he rushed in front of Feng Yishou and helped him up. After a careful inspection, he only calmed down slightly when he discovered that there were no injuries on the latter's body. The old man turned to Ling Han, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes as he said, "Was it you who injured young Master Feng?" Ling Han smiled, and said, "The term injured is too inaccurate. It should be said that we sparred, and he was no match for me. Hang, coming to our Cold Spear Association, and still daring to injure someone, how dare you?" The old man said coldly. He stretched out his right hand, and it instantly turned green, exuding the texture of metal. Multiple patterns flickered on it. This old man's cultivation level was in the deity transformation tier, so his abilities were really not low. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back, and said, "Your status is not low, either. Then let me ask you, do you have any impression of the names Jiang Yu Feng, Yun Yong Wang, Kang Xiu Yuan? Heng, it's useless even if you bring out a powerful backer. Today, no one will be able to save you." The old man leaped out, and struck out in Ling Han's direction. The palm had not yet arrived, but a strong gust of wind had already arrived. Origin power was oppressive, and its destructive power was extremely shocking. Ling Han pressed out with his right hand, and the old man was instantly sent flying. Peng, 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 peng. At least a dozen or so walls had been forcibly broken by him, and only then did he stop. He directly fainted. This time, he should really be taken seriously, right? Teng, teng, teng. A great many people rushed out from the manor, and surrounded Ling Han, but none of them made a move. Hang. A frightening aura circulated, and a figure also walked out. "Greetings, Seventh Elder." Everyone half knelt in greeting. That was an old man with a head full of white hair, but his spirit was hale and hearty, and his eyes were shining brightly. He stared at Ling Han, and said, "Young man, you are quite bold, actually daring to come to the Cold Spear Association and behave atrociously." "Behave atrociously?" Ling Han shook his head. "It was only self-defense. However, there is a limit to my patience. If no one is willing to have a proper talk with me, then I can only first knock you all over, and let you all calm down." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.